Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, airport staff, fellow commissioners. Welcome to the San Jose Airport Commission meeting of Monday, November 8, 2021. It's 1800 hours, and I hereby call this meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to ask Matthew Kazmierzak to please call the roll.
So it does help to unmute. Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Gupta, Commissioner Hankin,
Here.
Commissioner Patel,
Present.
Commissioner Baines,
Yes.
Commissioner Hendricks,
Present.
Commissioner Head,
Here.
Vice Chair Pyle,
Here.
Chair Connolly.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. And we'll go over our orders of the day at this time. There was a question that came up, Matthew, that I got just a short time ago on item 7B, and it had to do with our minutes from the last meeting. Let me ask Commissioner Hendricks to chime in on this because she's the one that noted it. Commissioner Hendricks.
Thank you, Chair. My question is under Section 7 Business, Item B, Electronic Billboards Report. Matthew, can you clarify, are we able to take action on this item? In other words, can we vote on this tonight?
Yes, that's why we have a potential motion there to signify that you would be, if you wish to make a motion, that you can make a motion and vote on it.
Okay, because
So it has to be-
they said accept the staff report, and I didn't know if that was too limiting.
No, that is the staff recommendation to you. So the staff recommendation to you is to do that. If you guys wish to make a different motion, you can make a different motion. But our staff recommendation is to accept the report of environmental report. And we'll present what we're going to be providing to the council as the motion to council.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And that met your clarification that you wanted, Commissioner Hendricks?
Yes, as long as we can vote on the item as it's stated in the minutes from the prior meeting, then I'm satisfied.
All right, very well. Are there any other questions about our order of the day, our agenda? Hearing none, then we will adopt the agenda as posted. Moving on to public records, I show none, but Matthew, we had a series of comments that did come in that are part of those public records, correct?
Correct. So I took all the public comments that I've received over the past week or so, including in up till today about noon or so, and included that on the website for everyone to look at. I sent an email out to all the commissioners with a link to that. So you should all have access to that.
Great.
It's all available to the public as well.
Thank you very much for doing that. We'll move on to item number 3, our consent calendar, the approval of minutes for a regular meeting of August 9th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Head.
Second.
I'm sorry, I can't see who seconded that.
Second, Bob Hankin.
Commissioner Hinkin second that. I want to open this up for discussion at this time. Is there any discussion, addition, or changes to those minutes?
I have a change. Can you hear me? This is
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
I can't figure out how to raise my hand, so there's 2 things that I think are worth noting under public comment. We didn't have any notations in the minutes that we received a very comprehensive report from the No Billboards in San Jose group. It was a substantial report. We allowed extra time for the, I believe his name was John Miller, but I can't remember, to speak. And yet it's like it didn't happen. So I was wondering if we could include a notation like we did for the other people that spoke, that this group would be included in that public comment section.
Would there be-
Reports. Oh,
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. Can you repeat that, please?
On my second item that I was,
Okay, go ahead with that. That's where you started to break up was when you started that second item.
okay, it's a very little nitpick. It should say commissioners, plural, share their thoughts on the Guadalupe Gardens encampment.
And where was that in the minutes again?
That's item,
Section E, Commissioner reports.
yeah, E, commissioner reports. It's just a little typo.
Okay. From the other commissioners, is there anything else in the minutes that need to be amended? Is there any objection to the adding of those items from Commissioner Hendricks to the minutes of August 9th?
So, sorry, one quick clarification. The public comments that you're referencing were not done during the general public comments. It was done during the specific business items. Is that what you're referencing?
Well, yeah, I just like some kind of a notation that that presentation was heard by the commission.
That a
Doesn't
public
matter to me
comment,
where you put it.
that a public comment was heard by the commission.
Right. So I think, Matthew, what you're saying is the public comment were on different items, but I think the question, Commissioner Hendricks, if I understood this correctly, I think the question really comes to, is there a place that we could at least notate that the billboards people did speak to us regarding their issues regarding the billboards?
Yeah, we probably could put it in the new, again, each item has public comments where public people speak to them. And we might be able to, let me figure out a way to put it in the new business area, or at least for the specific topics, that there were public comments that were received, and somehow denote that there were, let me see how I can note it within the group. Within the,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Commissioner Head and Commissioner Henkin, would you mind amending your motion and second to include Commissioner Hendricks' changes to the minutes to include the typographical error and also the notation that we're going to add at least some comment that the No Billboards folks had made a comment or presentation to the commission at our last meeting?
Not a problem.
All right, Commissioner Head amends that. Commissioner Henkin
I support it as
seconds
well.
that amendment. Any other discussion on this topic? All right, ladies and gentlemen, since we are meeting via Zoom, all votes at this meeting will be taken by roll call. So Mr. Kazmierzak, would you please do a roll call vote on the approval of the minutes, please?
okay, Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Gupta, Commissioner Henkin,
Yes.
Commissioner Patel,
Yes.
Commissioner Baines,
Yes.
Commissioner Hendricks,
Yes.
Commissioner Head,
Yes.
Vice Chair Pyle,
Yes.
Chair Conway.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
All right, the minutes have been approved for August 9th. Matthew, once those changes are made to the minutes, if you'll send them over, I'll get them signed for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 4, reports and information only, report of the chair. I'd like to share my screen if I could here. Okay. And I'm just working on getting this to start. I know that there's a way to do it here. My apologies.
Bottom right. There you up, left. There you go, that one.
Right there. Okay, great. So I had an opportunity, and this may be timed, I don't remember, to go by Fire Station 20. And I wanted to just kind of give you an update. This is our old fire station that's currently in use. And this was the rendition of Fire Station 20. Want to just give you a picture of what the new station is looking like. It's coming together very nicely. They've done a great job on it. And it actually looks like the rendition. These are just some pictures going through that I took of the exterior of the building at about 4 o'clock today. So they're moving right along on this. This is what it looked like in February of 21, and that's what it looks like today. Just give you a little feel for the great work that's been done on that. I'm excited to see this come together because I think it'll be a great addition for our airport. So that was the first thing that I wanted to share. And then the second item has to do with Guadalupe Gardens. And these are also recent photographs from there. And this is what it looked like in August of 21. And that's what it's looking like today with the great work of the city and the airport staff. Again, that's August 21. These are all from August of 21. And this is what the area looks like today. This was August 21 on Asbury Street. That's what it looked like just, at noon today. This was all in the abatement area, the section that they're doing, and it's all been cleared, and K-rail has been put up. Not the most attractive K-rail, but hopefully tonight we will have an opportunity to talk about some of the other issues. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank airport staff for the tremendous work that was done on this. It was not an easy task, and I'm certain that a lot of work on the staff end has gone into that. And so I just wanted to publicly say thank you. How do I stop sharing? Or have I stopped sharing?
Nope, you're still sharing.
Okay, how do I stop share? Oh, not stop video, right? Oh, stop share, got it.
There you go.
My apologies. So again, I just wanted to kudos to airport staff and the city because the place was a disaster area in August of 2021, and it looks pretty darn clean today. And so again, thank you. And that really concludes the chair's oral report. Moving on to item 4B, director's oral report. That'll be Judy Ross, Assistant Director of Aviation. Welcome, Director Ross.
Well, thank you, Chair Conley. I'll just report on some of the activities that have been going on since the last commission meeting. First, just a little bit about our air traffic. We're still down about 40% of where we were in 2019. However, since there's been a slow uptick in traffic since the Delta spike has slowly subsided. So we are optimistic that our traffic will be coming back, and we're hoping the business travel will start coming back beginning of next year. Our concessionaires have been impacted greatly due to staffing shortages, which have impacted the hours that they have been open and their ability to open up more establishments. And it also impacts this level of service they can provide. You can, if you've been to the airport, you would see that there are a couple more concessions that are open up with our concessions team working very diligently with our tenants. And also they continue to work on the menus because a lot of the menus are abridged and we do have long lines, which I did experience this morning as well. Next is a more happy tone, and the Zoom zone opened up on October 27th when we held a ribbon cutting. The Zoom zone is in collaboration with public-private partnerships with Children's Discovery Museum of San Jose. And I would like to thank Vicki Day of our staff. She's the manager of customer experience, who worked really closely with Children's Discovery Museum to make this happen. The museum is located in Terminal B between gates 24 and 25. So as you're traveling, I would encourage you to stop in and take a look at the exhibits that were actually built by the artists at the Children's Discovery Museum, because it's not only a children's area. I've seen a lot of adults in the museum area too, enjoying the exhibits that are in there. Next is regarding our parking. We are in the process of implementing a new parking system, SCADATA, which is now in lot 1, and they're slowly moving through the other lots. But it's the new system is called SCADATA. I would just alert as you come into the airport for business. And next time, hopefully we can come into person next time. But I'll just alert you that please work with staff because your current parking cards will not work on the new system. So we'll need to get you new parking cards as you enter the new system. In addition, the staff has implemented a reservation system that has now been deployed for Lot 1. So if you go onto the website, you'll be able to see the reservation button and you'll be able to reserve a parking space currently in Lot 1. So, and with a slight discount, a $3 discount a day if you reserve it ahead of time. Another exciting thing that's done is as we move through implementing higher level technology, we have worked with Alaska Airlines for a demonstration project for automatic bag drop system. So you can go up to the system that's being piloted and not only check in, but tag your bag and send it on its way through the bag system. So it's a nice little addition to the airport and another customer experience. At one point, I can remember when they said that we're going to have a, you can transition the airport without talking to anybody, and we're getting there. So from the time you enter to the time you go through the checkpoint till you get to your gate. So if you're at the airport, take a look at it. It's in the Alaska Airlines ticket counter in Terminal B. And as Chair Conley showed you, was the ARF building. It's coming along real nicely on schedule. And it's also ahead of schedule, but we do plan to have a ribbon cutting and opening in mid-January. So we're excited to get that facility online, and the staff has done a great job bringing that to completion. And I'm available for any questions. If you have any questions of me, thank you.
Do we have any questions for Assistant Director Ross? All right, thank you for that comprehensive report. We'll move on to item 4C, Council Liaison, the Honorable David Cohen from District 4. Councilmember Cohen.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be with you tonight. Sorry I haven't been able to join you for a while. Just wanted to say hello and also let you know that we've had a few things that we've talked about, I think, as a council, but I think you've already had some reports on them. Obviously, we've been focused on the cleanup of the Guadalupe Park area. We've had a few discussions about the long-term plans for how we're going to keep the area clean and clear. And we've postponed putting up a fence. We want to see how well the K-rails are working. It looks like for now, the site is staying clear, so I'm happy to see that. We also have adopted a resolution or a agenda item last week to help the airport businesses get back on their feet, and at the same time focused a little bit on what kind of living wage the workers working in those businesses are making. So we're going to be looking at that in the future to make sure that we have a uniform living wage policy across the city. And I think that's primarily it from a council standpoint, but I'm glad to be with you and looking forward to hearing the remainder of the discussion tonight.
Councilmember Cohen, will you be able to remain through the Guadalupe Gardens update? There may be some specific questions that members of the commission have in reference to what you've discussed at City Council.
Yes, definitely. I plan to stay through the meeting tonight, so I look forward to being able to answer questions. If you have any now or later, I'd be happy to participate.
Great. Do we have any questions for Councilmember Cohen other than what's already on our business agenda for this evening that we may ask for his input on? Seeing none, Councilmember Cohen, great to see you again. Thank you so much for being here at tonight's Airport Commission meeting.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 4D, our staff reports. Matthew, do you have anything additional to add that we didn't get from Assistant Director Ross?
I do have one administrative thing. The city of San Jose has a vaccine requirement for its staff. So all staff have to submit the vaccination statuses and or testing requirements before coming back to work. But that does mean that you guys as commissioners are also being asked a question from the city clerk as to your vaccination status. So you should receive an email from me on that. I don't need any copies of documents from you. A simple yes or no of you being vaccinated in an email to me is all the city clerk is asking for at this moment. So if you can take a look at that email and get back to me, that would be helpful. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so very much. We're moving on to item 4E, commissioner reports. Do we have reports from any of our commissioners this evening? Well, if that's an indication, it might be a quick meeting tonight. We'll move on to public comment. Members of the public are invited to speak on any item that does not appear on today's agenda, and that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. Meeting attendees are usually given 2 minutes to speak on any discussion item and or during open forum. The time limit is at the discretion of the chair of the meeting and may be limited when appropriate. Speakers using a translator will be given twice the time allotted to ensure non-English speakers receive the same opportunity to directly address the Airport Commission. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on an item that is not on our agenda this evening?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Very well, we will move on to item number 6, our noise report, community noise concerns. That is given by Adam Cordarolo, our noise and general aviation supervisor. Adam, welcome.
Good evening, commissioners. So this last quarter, obviously, as Assistant Director Ross mentioned, we are seeing that slow uptick in operations. Obviously, compared to last year, we're up by quite a great deal, but compared to the previous quarter, we're only up about 15 to 20% there. So operations are still increasing. The good news is the total complaints, there really hasn't been much of a change, especially year over year. We're actually down. Considering how much higher we are in operations, it's clearly not being too impactful, at least on the indications we're getting from the community. South flow operations, as expected, as we get into the late summer and early fall months, those are up by quite a large amount as we get the windy, rainy weather coming into our area, including the last few weeks. And otherwise, again, things are pretty stable for the most part. Intrusions were up by a good amount. I think, it's been in the news, a lot of troubles at some of the larger airlines across the country, a lot due to staffing issues. And I think that definitely had an impact on the late arrivals and intrusions into curfew this year. Next slide, please. And as far as the complaint numbers go, again, it's looking pretty stable. Year over year, again, Sunnyvale continues to be our largest supplier of complaints, although, again, it's very stable. We're only 2 below where we were last year, so pretty similar numbers. And again, most of the other numbers are pretty stable, although, when you go from 3 to 153, it's not a large number numerically, but percentage-wise, it's a pretty big jump. But again, when you're working with such low numbers to start with, any change is generally a pretty high percentage. But overall, again, we're pretty low. And again, if you compare it to a few years ago, 2018, 2019, were much, much lower than we were back then. We were, looking at 15,000 plus complaints sometimes in a year. So again, to have only 3,000 in 3 months is quite lower than we were seeing before. And just to conclude, I'll be actually transitioning out of my role in the noise office supervisor position in the next couple of months. And so the next time you all meet, I anticipate there'll be a new person presenting this report to you. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Adam. Are there questions for Adam on the noise report? And if you are not able to raise your hand, please just chime in with who you are so that I know and I can allow you to speak. All right, seeing no questions, we'll move on to other community noise concerns. Are there any community noise concerns from the public?
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
All right, we'll move on to item number 7, our business Guadalupe Gardens update. This is an item for potential action. And what I'd like to do at this time, Matthew, can you give us some background on what the airport's recommendation to City Council was and what the airport's thought process was with it, so that the commission can have an idea of what was presented, not what was approved by the council, but what was presented.
Yeah, so I have a small presentation that I'll give you here that sort of walk through some of what we've gone through and what's happened with it. Again, this is just to sort of show you the area that we're talking about, that space between Heading and Ashbury and Coleman and the River Park there. This is a large area that has been fallow land, and a unsanctioned, unauthorized encampment has rose up in that area. The one thing I did want to note is that the orange line here that you can see in this slide, that is our inner safety zone. This is a report from the Airport Land Use Commission from the comprehensive land use plan that they put out. The inner safety zone is one of the more restrictive locations where they generally do not want activity or residential activity to happen. So that's in part one of the reasons why this area has been an area of concern. As Dan showed you, over the summer, there was a significantly large encampment that happened all across the 40 acres. We had well over 200 individuals, lots of RVs parked there, lots of cars, even boats. There were increased police and fire activity. We did receive lots of calls about fires that were going on, increased general services from the city with trash and car removal. Local businesses were being impacted, and we were receiving reports of increased bird activity from pilots and concerns around that. So those were all things you generally know. These documents were all shared with the commission. This is just a timeline of the letters between the FAA and the city. Most of this is the city's desire was to try and build a reasonable time schedule to allow us to try and create some additional housing opportunities for those that are unhoused. We didn't want to abate without having some place for people to go. So in large part, that's driving a lot of the conversation with this. When there is a city team that has been addressing this issue, so every morning at 8 a.m., the airport, along with the housing office, the PRNS, which is the Parks and Recreation Neighborhood Services Department, have been getting together to try and talk through this and to slowly work through the plan. Our goals and objectives for the plan has been to try and, these 6 items that you see here, basically optimizing the use of city funds, honoring our commitments to the FAA, protecting the health and safety of the unhoused, protecting the natural environment, preventing future encampment, and protecting the businesses. So those were sort of our goals through this process, to work through it, trying to balance all of these items with it. And we've been working, so last one for this is just, we've been working with Home First. Home First has been our social services organization that the city contracts with to try and help people do a number of different things. The project has been quite a challenge. We've been trying to work through it in a very humane way to make sure that the people that are there have opportunities and have options to them. The biggest challenge in this is there's just not enough housing in the county for all the people that are there. And the city itself has over 200 encampments, of which Guadalupe Gardens is only one. So we're trying to work through it. Guadalupe Gardens is probably by far the largest, but we're still working through the big challenges that the city and county have with this. It is a very difficult problem, very taxing on city staff to go through and do these things, as well as for the people that are unhoused. Abatement is very disruptive to people, so we try and only do it when necessary. One of the reasons why this encampment arose was because the CDC recommended to not abate encampments, to not try and spread the coronavirus around. So there was a thought process in place when this started to try and leave encampments in place and to address them as we were able to emerge through the pandemic. So the plan that we had put in place was these 3 stages. So stage 1 and 2 are the areas that were complete that Dan was showing you pictures for Stage 3 is the one that was being planned for in the spring of 2022. And so, right now everyone's sort of moved over to the stage 3 area. As of Friday, the K-rail was put up. That was the last of the K-rail stuff went up on Friday. The abatement last week for this section finished, completed on Tuesday. So that stuff just, all those pictures are brand new in terms of everything being up and there in place. On Saturday, one of the K-rails was already moved. The city staff or our airport staff pushed it back into place, into position today. But there is some trash and debris has also continued through some of the placement of the K-rail. And some of it was documented this weekend already. The council, so I'm just going to give you a quick thing. When we went to the council 2 weeks ago on this, we presented them with 3 different options. One option was the fence. You can see sort of here environmentally it was already approved. The budget was already budgeted. The completion was scheduled to happen. But we were also asked to provide 2 other options of trying to increase activity in the region so that we could try and do it without a fence. These other 2 options were other options that were presented. One was limited activity, trying to put stuff around and doing things that we already had funding for some of it. Some of it we did not have funding for, but some of the approvals were in place, but others had questions about it. Option 3 was the full master plan for Guadalupe Gardens that has been on the books for quite some time, but there's a lot of work that would need to go into that, none the least of which both options 2 and 3 would require some conversations with the community, further conversations about what would be desired for that area, what the plans would be for it. When we put together some of these things, our thought process on it was some ideas, but it's not necessarily what the community itself would like to see happen there. So those things still need to go on. Those would be a much longer term process for it. When the council met, this was the actions they asked of the city. So again, I should stress that this is a city-wide endeavor. The airport's only one element of it. Many other departments have been involved. It's very multi-departmental. Much of the credit to the abatement and the cleanup and those things should be going to the Beautify San Jose team. They've been the ones that have had the boots on the ground. They've been the ones who've been managing that process and have been working to get this stuff done. So you can see there's a number of different activities the council would like to try to have happen in lieu of a fence. Some of these things will take time to go through. The council did ask the city, so all the departments, to return to them in early 2022 with additional analysis on how the current activities happen. Right now, it's just the K-rail to try and keep that area clear. That's the only thing that's in place. There is some minor inspections that are done to see what's happening over there. That's how we found out the K-rail was moved. And there will be some monitoring as well for dumping activities to try and figure out what's going on with that and have that stuff picked up. So that's my report on it. We're open for questions if you have specific questions about anything.
I have a number myself, but I want to open it up to our commission members to ask questions in this regard. We have questions from the commission.
You have one from Ken Pyle?
Commissioner Pyle or Vice Chair Pyle?
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is great progress, Matthew and the rest of the team for making it look much better in terms of just cleanliness and reducing the danger of something bad happening. My question in the memo, I think that was, and I can't remember the exact date, the October council meeting, the 3 options were presented, and there was something in there about 2.15 million if you didn't have it fenced off, that would be the cost to keep it clean annually. And I'm wondering where that number came from, because I haven't seen, where that would be. It just seems like a lot of money to kind of keep it clean and keep it enforced, to make sure that people don't start camping there, abate it before it happens. So that's why I'm kind of curious.
So the option there of that ongoing activity, so that would be an annual cost. That would be basically 20 hours of police officers going in, patrolling that area, addressing issues in that area. It would also include private security. It would also include rangers. So the staffing of the area is the most expensive part by far. So you'd still have staff if you had to do some sort of security. So if you had a fence, you wouldn't need to staff it. Much like we did for the previous Hope Village area, there's a fence around that. We don't staff it and we don't have security there on an ongoing basis. We do inspections on it to make sure that the fence itself is in still decent shape and make repairs to it when necessary. But one of the actions that was being asked of us was to do some patrols or monitoring. And if you were to do that, you know, some of that staffing would be significant amount of time, especially if you were doing it on a full-time basis. There was also talk about having rangers out there on a full-time basis. There was also built into that were costs associated with addressing dumping. The dumping is actually quite expensive. We had it happen a couple of weeks ago where someone dumped a bunch of appliances, and the Beautify San Jose people commented that the appliances are the most difficult to address. They're very expensive to get away. They're very bulky, and the city does have to pay for that to have happen. When vehicles get dumped, the city has to pay to have towing companies come out and pull those vehicles away. And quite often, you know, we have to deal with hazardous materials as a result of that. So those things would also have additional costs to them. And then encampments. Anytime, as we heard through the discussion, again, the airport's not an expert on this, but as we heard through the discussion at the city council, anytime someone puts down a tent or a sleeping situation, they are deemed as an encampment, and as such, they have certain rights that go along with them. As such, you cannot just trespass them. You have to go through a different process, which includes noticing 72 hours in advance, and then having the team come out there on the day to actually abate them, which would take additional resources, staffing, personnel. So most of the costs of that are, as we were asked to come up with a personnel-based plan, that is personnel costs that are associated with it, with the exception of the dumping activity.
So it seems like, for instance, the cell phone parking lot that's next, or the half acre that's next to the cell phone parking lot on the, you know, in the airport grounds, there's no fence around that. And somehow that is managed, you know, there's no encampments there, it's clean. And it just seems like if we treated the other side in the same way, perhaps, you know, it could be done without as much cost. I don't know.
Yeah, the big difference there is the cell phone lot in that area. You're talking about a thin strip between an active road and an active airport, and 40 acres that, for the most part, is not part of an active road. I mean, it's around, yes, it's surrounded by, you know, Taylor and Heading on the two ends, but you know, kind of behind department. Businesses, there's trees there. You know, much like we as you know, individuals who have houses or places, you know, you like nice, quiet places, not some place where you would encamp in the middle of a bunch of people. So you know, in part, those areas are not attractive sites for encampments.
Yeah, it just seems like, you know, if you had a police officer you know, a shift continually for a year, that would probably be like $600,000, assuming $200,000 loaded overhead, you know, to do that, assuming it could all be done. It just seems like 2.1 is it seems like a high number, that's all.
Police officers, we were quoted as about $200 an hour, and you wouldn't have just one police officer. You might have more than one. You'd have shifts that would overlap that you'd have to deal with. So it does get pricey when you put the full wrap of everything and the costs associated. You'd also have to add in vehicles and equipment costs that go along with them, not just the personnel cost. So, and granted, you'd also divert those from, you know, someplace else in the city. You'd have to take it. So you might have to do overtime or something else. You know, the city has the same staffing shortages as elsewhere.
Again, it seems like you could also, and as it said in I think the mayor's memo, it seems like you could use cameras as well, like we do around other parts of the airport. So you don't have to actually have physical presence there either. But anyway, those are my comments.
Okay.
Other comments from commission members?
You have Commissioner Patel with his hand raised.
Commissioner Patel.
Yeah, so I had a question regarding option 3 for Guadalupe Garden. So it looked like this was inside the safety area of the airport. So isn't the goal of that to minimize foot traffic? So it kind of felt like option 3 was trying to increase foot traffic with hiking trails or disc golf. So if you could shed a little bit of light on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that is one of the areas that would have to be explored, is that the type of activity that you would do would have to be activity that doesn't attract large crowds. You are allowed to have within this area so many people per acre. I'd have to go back to the Airport Land Use Commission and their report to look at what actually the acreage is that's allowed and how many people are allowed there. But that was, if you go back a number of years to when we were talking about the soccer fields, that was certainly one of the issues that was addressed during that time, because the soccer fields were deemed as going to be pulling in too many people given the use of that land. The thought process with some of this is that the activity that you would try and engender would be things like a hiking trail or something that was a low attractiveness to people, so that you wouldn't have lots of people crowded around together, but you would be able to have sufficient number of people there to discourage people from living in that area, as you would have residential use of the area. Something like, you could have like a dog park or a community garden. Again, a Frisbee park was thrown out as well, or Frisbee golf, I guess it's called. And those activities would pull people into the area to try and activate the use of the area. And that would discourage, again, also re-encampments. But you're right, you'd want to make sure that whatever activity you're doing fulfills the limitations that exist for that area. And again, in the Airport Land Use Commission, they spell out certain things that are definitely not allowed. Park uses are generally ones that are acceptable within limitations of density.
Great, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Patel. Other commissioners with comments or questions?
Commissioner Henkin was next.
Commissioner Henkin, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I mean, realizing and appreciating the extraordinary challenges for the rehousing, I was just curious, how is it going and how are you measuring success? Are you finding places, or are they just getting displaced to other areas?
I can't answer all of those. And so the part of the reason we did the plan the way we did in these phases was, frankly, to give the city time to try and build enough housing to provide folks with a variety of options. It's the desire of the city to try and meet the people, the unhoused, where they're at. Some have various sheltering, desires or needs. Some might need a hotel room. Some might need a tiny house. Some might need, vouchers or other type of rental assistance, or first month, last month rent type of situation. Some might need substance abuse issues. So we were trying to build ourselves a plan that had this ramp to allow time to try and address the multitude of issues that went on, as well as come up with a number of options as we went through into the spring of 2022. The desire is that, we do have tiny houses that are coming on board. They're going to be across the street, across Guadalupe Gardens, near the police department. There's a lot over there that's going to have it. My understanding is the county's doing a bunch of work. They've just recently bought some hotels. The city itself bought some hotels as well. But frankly, it is. I mean, as the council expressed during the meeting, it's a very difficult problem, very challenging. It's not something that's very easy to deal with. You're right to address that. There are some residents that have certainly different needs. The residents that have RVs, their preference is not necessarily for a shelter or a hotel room. It's more for some sort of safe parking site for their RV. But we've seen, as we go through this, the safe parking sites that the city attempts to put up are not always welcome within those communities. And so we do our best to hold these conversations. The city is, in general, is trying to look for additional sites. But as has been noted, it's not an easy process. It's one that often takes time. It's one that has lots of conversations around it. And so that's really, again, when I had those 6 goals, we try and balance those goals. It's certainly not the desire of the city to shift the unhoused from one location to another location. It's certainly not the desire of the city to make life more difficult for people that are already having a tremendous amount of difficulties. So we've been trying to be very thoughtful in how we approach this, and trying to balance all those different needs. So it has been certainly a challenge.
It certainly sounds like it. So I commend everybody for all their efforts on it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Henkin. Other commissioners with comments or questions?
You have Commissioner Head next.
Commissioner Head, please go ahead. You may need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, Chair Connolly, I was a little slow on that. some reflections that this is an extremely, the question of how to take the unhoused people among us and give them long-term substantive housing is a really challenging one. That's certainly, all of us are aware of that. And I think from my point of view, the balance that was in the memo signed by Mayor Liccardo, Vice Mayor Jones, Councilmember Prowls, and Councilmember Cohen struck a balance between the humanity of handling the situation of people in very desperate situations, the need for safety in the airport zone, the human complications that interact in a number of places across the city. As an airport commission, we're only focusing on the area within our specific purview, but this same dynamic is happening in neighborhoods across the city, and is challenging for the immediate neighbors as it is challenging for our airport operations. And since we only meet quarterly, I would focus on supporting the humanity and the energy and the budget that was in the memo and the actions taken by council, and be sure that if council reevaluates and airport staff reevaluates what happens in the next 90 days, that we work to be as energetic as we can to complete all these different objectives. And if you need to lean into the budget so you can spend a little to get the good objectives accomplished. I couldn't offer any specific details of A policy better than B policy. It's way too complicated at the distance that we're sitting at. Compliment the airport staff for working well with the other staff at the city, and have only support for the difficulty that the mayor and council have to make in these decisions. Thanks very much to everybody that's gotten the accomplishment done so far, keeping up the good work.
Thank you, Commissioner Head. Do we have other commissioners that would like to make comments or have questions? Seeing none, I'm sorry,
Commissioner Hendricks has her hand up.
Commissioner
I don't know
Hendrick,
how to do that. I don't have the three dots. I can't raise my hand
that's
on the
okay.
Zoom call. I'm sorry about that. So I also agree with Commissioner Head. I appreciate all the hard work that's gone into the current state and how the progress has been made. Clearly, you've done an amazing job. There's more to go. So right now everyone's in the zone 3 area, or is that, I was doing some research. Is that what they call a runway protection zone, or is it an obstacle-free zone? And I didn't know, do we have people living in the obstacle-free zone right now?
It's that area is designated as the inner safety zone. I don't believe it's the runway, the other one that you called it. It's the inner safety zone is what it's called. I don't know.
Okay, is that
Should we-
200 feet from the end of the runway?
I don't know. I don't believe so, because it is, you have 880 in between. You also have an access road in between. You also have an additional access road in between. And then you also have the burrowing owl habitat in between that. So there's a whole big swath of property in between.
Okay.
those.
So but it is for aviation purposes, in the event that we did have an emergency and an aircraft had to or did breach that space, we could suffer a loss of life. And that would be very tragic and very preventable. So for me, while I think it's great to make things look good, and there's been about 2 or 3 decades here where we've had time to do things on this property that has not happened. We have an immediate need for life and safety to get these folks out of there. So I support option 1, a fence. And I would make it as robust as possible. The airport does a great job with security at the airport. They do a great job with fencing. They do a great job with maintenance. And I just feel that if it's $1.5 million and you're gonna put 9-gauge 1-inch fabric up there, 8 feet tall, it solves the immediate problem. Is it beautiful? No. And can it be taken down later? Yes. So I just wanted to put on the record that I support option 1, so that we can move forward, make people safe, and then make it beautiful and find other uses later, which take way more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hendricks. Do we have other commissioners that would like to comment or ask questions on this topic?
Commissioner Smith?
Hi there. I have a
Welcome.
question about the illegal dumping. Someone mentioned earlier about that there's just some cameras around the area. Is there cameras in the area where we're getting a majority of the illegal dumping? And is there any, signs, or when the people are doing this, is there any police or somebody there to, remind them that this is illegal and they can't do it? Or is it just kind of an open area?
So great questions. The land is open area, so that was one of the challenges to deal with, as well as the access roads to it are fairly not well-traveled roads. So it's very easy for contractors and others to pull in there and dump stuff. And there are not cameras in that area there. Again, it's fallow land, so there was nothing to affix the cameras to. There's not power out there. There's not network cables out there. All those things are things that we are looking into as a city to try and look through to see if there's things that can be done about it. Just as an anecdotal thing, as we've been doing the abatements, we've had lots of staff out there to try and talk with the unhoused out there. There's lots of conversations to make sure everyone knows what to expect and when to expect the abatement so that nobody was surprised during it. But as we were doing that, we had staff out there having these conversations. And as they were out there with the San Jose Police Department, somebody pulled up their car right then and there and started dumping stuff right in front of the police. It's $1,000 fine. So the police went over and had a conversation with that person about it. But again, the brazenness of this activity is certainly a challenge to go through.
So, okay, so this is just one situation out of Lord knows how many. Is there any follow through, or are people just, let go, let free, and just kind of like, oh well? It just seems like so many people just, whether you're poor, whatever economic situation you're in, it seems like I have it here happen in our condo. People pull up and dump, who don't live here. And it just seems like everyone just kind of shrugs their shoulders because there's no follow through anymore. And, it's costing the taxpayers, I don't have to tell you, millions. And it's completely pathetic. I mean, there is a way to properly dispose things. And as we know, as we drive down the 87, the 85, the 880, the garbage is just completely nuts. And, I go to other cities quite a bit, being the, job situation I have, and they don't have this. So why are we having it? And the airport is an extremely, volatile area as far as security and, garbage on the runway. I mean, that alone is a whole, problem. But, this is my question. I mean, even in Southern California, where I go often, you don't see this kind of stuff. And, I also question, unfortunately, having family members who in the past were homeless and drug users. A lot of people don't want to be housed, because there's rules to follow. And I mean, are they are these people being vetted or on a list, or is it just, I mean, how is that exactly being done to who gets a tiny house, who gets this, who gets that?
That's a question for us.
Mhm.
I don't have an easy answer to that one. I do know that Home First has been working with our folks within the housing department who work in conjunction with the county. Many of the social services, especially around medical services, are done through the county itself. I do know that there are priority lists that they maintain. I can't say how that stuff is done. That's outside the purview of us. It's not our day job, so I can't speak specifically to that. But I do know there are processes that you're right, they do have to go through to get that. We do endeavor to try and that was one of the things that where Home First was helping us go through and talk with all the people to make sure that they were on the list for housing, to make sure that the options were being provided to them to try and meet them where they're at. And make sure that those conversations took place. You're right, they're not always easy conversations to have, but they're ones that are worth having. And the city has been doing that. Again, the challenge is the wait lists for these things are not necessarily short. And, both the entire county and all the jurisdictions in it need to do more to provide available housing to make something available. And that's ultimately at the end of the day, this is a housing issue that we're trying to deal
Well,
with.
correct. And what about, back to my questions about the illegal dumping? I mean, is there follow through when these people are caught, dumping, garbage, and somebody mentioned cars or whatever it is that they're dumping? It's, I'll tell you what, it's embarrassing when people land in San Jose now because of all the garbage. And that's not only around the airport, like I mentioned earlier, it's everywhere. So, I mean, is anybody held responsible when they're caught?
It's my understanding when people are caught, they are held responsible. They are fined for it. The fine is quite hefty, especially when there are markings on trucks. The case that I referenced earlier, the truck itself was stolen. The people, when they were caught, they fled the scene. So, even in those situations that, the police do their best that they can for the situation, and they are doing their best to hold people accountable. But it's not, you don't always catch people as they're throwing stuff out of their vehicle.
Do you have any further comments, Commissioner Smith?
No, not at this time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Other members of the commission that have comments or thoughts on this issue? So I'll go ahead and chime in, and Councilmember Cohen, I'll include you in this aspect of it because I have a number of questions. Number one, I believe that fencing works. We saw it there at Hope Village on the north side of Heading between Spring Street and Coleman Avenue. And I've been by there several times, taken pictures of it. There was a small, and that's 2-inch fencing. It's not a higher security fencing. There was a small hole in there that, when the airport sees it, that gets taken care of. But we haven't had the illegal dumping issues. We haven't had the re-encampment issues there. And as I see it, the city for more than 30 years, since I was a youngster, and those homes were removed, this has been a problem area. It has been abated over and over and over again from illegal encampments there. And the dumping, I can't even imagine what the dumping fees are. And so while I understand and appreciate the council wanting to use a friendlier tact, in real life, this doesn't work. The K-rail that's there is great, but I'll tell you what I think we're going to see. The folks that are across the street from there and others that are driving down Spring Street are just going to dump trash in that other area. It's going to turn into a nightmare and a headache. the, we've had challenges with the FAA approval of activities in that area. A few years ago, we thought we had a great idea with working with the earthquakes to put soccer fields in there, and the FAA put the kibosh on that, and it would have been a really beautiful area to be able to see that. So I think, one, I want to go to Matthew. Matthew, do we have a list of approved activities? What the FAA has said, you can do this right now in this area, or do we have to continue to present items to them on a case-by-case basis for their approval? That's my first question to Matthew.
I would defer to Assistant Director Ross. She's
Director Ross, can you help us out on that one?
Yeah, it's that area is basically impacted by the Airport Land Use Commission, the county under state rules. And I would like to go back to Commissioner Hendricks. I mentioned the object-free area, just to clarify that space, that all object area free areas are within the fenced-in area of the airport. So just so you're aware that those areas are already protected. So as Matthew pointed out, most of that area is within the inner safety area of the Airport Land Use Commission. It has very low density and passive activities. So, it's minimal activity that can take place there, but as Matthew pointed out, you can have strolling paths and just things that don't attract a high level of people. And I see Ryan does have his hand up, so he probably has the page right in front of him that he could kind of reference the document itself. So Ryan, do you go ahead and share what you have?
You may need to unmute yourself, Ryan.
He is unmuted.
He is. Okay, not sure what happened there. But it's basically, as you said, it's low density. The FAA's concern is that that property was purchased with grant money for approach protection and noise concerns. So it's an effort to, well, not to re-inhabitate, and just because they're unhoused doesn't make it a compatible land use. That's the point, is it's noise abatement to remove people from noise sensitive areas, and approach protection is to ensure that nothing, that area remains fairly clear, and the approach is protected. And if at any chance an aircraft loses power or has some other needs and needs to put down, that is an area that they could put the aircraft down in. So I think Ryan is back now. Ryan, you wanted to share additional information?
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Ryan Sheelan, Airport Plan Development. Yeah, I want to make a few clarifications. We're mixing up two things here. There's FAA safety surfaces, federal government, and then there's state, Caltrans Aeronautics, which is the comprehensive land use plan, the ALUC. So those are safety zones. What I believe Commissioner Hendricks was discussing earlier, those are FAA surfaces. So the runway, the RPZ, runway protection zone, the obstacle-free area, obstacle-free zone, those surfaces for the most part are on airport. The RPZ extends off airport and it ends well before heading, so north of heading. So not where any of the unhoused are. For the ALUC safety zones, those are the ones that I believe Matthew had on the screen earlier. That's a little bit different story. That does allow folks to operate in this, in this area, not residential, but other uses, passive, open space. There are density limits as well. The other point I want to make is there is a approved Guadalupe Gardens master plan for this area. It was approved in 2002 by City Council and by the FAA. So the FAA has blessed it with a list of projects, which includes passive, open space, pathways, trails, those type of uses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So going back to some of the points that that I was making is that I really believe that what airport staff did, and they were required to present 3 options, but option number 1 really does solve the issue. And we've seen that fencing the area after abatement does work. It eliminates the illegal dumping issues, especially if we use the higher gauge fencing, the 1 inch instead of the 2-inch fencing. It's much harder to cut. I believe that, we're only abating over towards Guadalupe, the Guadalupe River area. That is still going to be a city problem because you'll have a number of people in the Guadalupe River area regardless. And Commissioner Smith brought up a point, and I do some work with a nonprofit that's in downtown San Jose that deals with homelessness. And there are a number of people that choose homelessness, and there are those that have a real need that are out. I absolutely believe that we should be helping the people that are trying to get back on their feet, and they're trying to raise their families, or they're homeless for no purpose other than things didn't go well for them with a job or things of that nature. But there are a number of people that I've worked with over the years that have actually said to me, I don't want to conform to the rules of society. I don't want, I can go to a shelter, but I don't want to go to a shelter because of those rules. And so we have, invited a lot of homelessness by allowing it to take place. Now we're abating it in a fair fashion, giving people plenty of notice. But in all these years, abatement after abatement after abatement, trash has come back, human waste has come back, illegal encampments have come back, and we don't see that on the heading area. The last thing that I want to say is that for 20 to 30 years, we've been promised that the city would develop that area, Guadalupe Gardens plan. It hasn't happened in 20 years. What's to make me believe that it's going to happen in the next 5 years? I just don't believe it. And honestly, I don't think that the airport and the city should have to deal with this over and over again. And so Councilmember Cohen, can you maybe enlighten me as to where I've maybe missed an interpretation on what's going on here and why the resistance there is by city council to, once we get this abated, to put up a fence and keep people out of there until we're ready to beautify that area?
Well, thank you. Sure. There's been a lot of different points brought up through the conversation. First, I'll talk about the housing process. So the city, in conjunction with various organizations, primarily Home First, but others, spends a lot of time, as Matthew said, out talking with folks to figure out what services they need, getting to know them, becoming connected with them. That's an important step in the process. Our objective is to find resources for everybody, and some resources will be housing, and as you point out, others will need other kinds of services. And hopefully in the long run, the county will have opportunities for us to serve the folks who aren't looking for housing. Somebody asked about, what about people who don't want it? Nobody's forced into a housing situation if they won't accept it, right? People have to accept the offer. But we do find, and we did this up in Component Drive in North San Jose in my district, where we had 70 people there. We cleared that property. That's property that was owned by Apple. And Home First actually housed 50 of them and put them under roofs, which was an amazing percentage. So my belief is that if we spend time doing that outreach, people will get housed. Of course, as it was pointed out, there's a limited amount of housing, but the city's working really hard. We're purchasing 5 hotels this year to provide more rooms. We're building some more small home villages. I'm working really hard to identify a couple of sites for safe RV parking. So at that point, we can force people that are living in RVs to move to those safe locations, but we have to have those sites first. So anyway, that's the first point. The second point is about illegal dumping. What we're learning across the city is that while illegal dumping gets blamed on the unhoused living on sites, it's typically not the unhoused residents who are doing the illegal dumping. It's typically other people who are driving up to sites, finding convenient places to dump. It could be contractors who are trying to save dumping money. It could be city residents who don't understand the process by which they can get rid of items. We're working really hard to promote to our residents that San Jose offers free large item pickup. So all you got to do is call a number and schedule something. It seems easier to me to put something in front of your house to get picked up than to put it in your car, drive it somewhere, and hope you don't get caught dumping it illegally. But we have many places around the city, particularly along our creeks, where that's happening. My belief is that the K-rails are a deterrent to that illegal dumping. And if it happens, it'll happen around the perimeter, which makes it easier to clean up because they can't drive their vehicles onto the site. So we're waiting to see how that works. My feeling is that a fence will just cause people to dump still on the outside of that fence, and it won't necessarily stop illegal dumping. Or it'll just push the illegal dumping to a spot right across the street or along the river or somewhere else. So the city will still be on the hook for cleaning that illegal dumping up wherever it ends up going. So I don't consider the fence a solution to the illegal dumping problem. I think there's a lot of other things we have to do for education to help people understand how they can legally get rid of their garbage. Our concern really was spending over $1.5 million on a fence that may not be a permanent fixture, and that money could be better used doing other things. There was a question about the 2.1 million. I don't think that we need to staff to that level. But I do think that the plan to spend 3 months without a fence to see how well we can control the situation before we spend that $1.5 million was the prudent thing to do, especially given that there is a hope that some of these site activation projects will move forward. And that would mean you would need access to the site anyway through openings, which in theory, for people who want to camp without a vehicle, they could still use those openings to get into the site. So it's a difficult conversation. Fencing can work, but we've also seen in many places in the city, like along Union Pacific corridors and others, where fencing isn't a deterrent and people cut through and use the site. So there were a lot of concerns about whether or not fencing was a solution that will work. So that's kind of where we landed, was to see how it goes with K-rail and this process. We were mostly concerned about moving people off of a site before we had a place for them to go, because we're just going to displace them to another place in the city and have to deal with their effects wherever they go. So we're hoping that we'll have more available places for people by the time the spring abatement happens in phase 3. So hopefully that answers some of your questions.
So, and I appreciate your input on that. The number of times that we've abated that area has had to cost the city millions of dollars already. And so every time we have to abate, there is a huge expense involved in that. And that's really, I do believe that fencing works and keeps, once people are out of there, keeps them from returning to the area. And the reason some of these fences are cut is because they're the lower grade cyclone fences. They're not the higher grade fences like we use around the perimeter of the airport. And my concern is fiscal responsibility. And that is, we spend 1.5 million today, or over the course of the next 5 years, we spend, all right, let's say it's not the 2.15 million that is being estimated. Let's say it's only 1.5 million a year. Now all of a sudden you're at $7.5 million to continually deal with a problem, and we don't have the law enforcement staff, we don't have city personnel. There are help wanted signs all over the place. I'm just not convinced that the city is capable of keeping the area clear. And going back to the thoughts that, geez, maybe something will happen in Guadalupe Gardens. Well, we thought in 2002 something was going to happen in Guadalupe Gardens. So that's where my concern is. And I'd like to be supportive of the airport's position that fencing is the best solution. We've seen that for, I don't know, Matthew, how many years has Hope Village been fenced at this point?
2
years. We don't have any encroachments. We don't have trash in the area. It seems to have worked there, and you've got a 2-year model to work with. That's my thoughts on this. And I want to give you any other opportunity, Councilmember Cohen, and I really do appreciate that you're here with us, because it's important for us to be able to hear both sides of things.
Yeah, and I appreciate that input. And obviously it's not that, I don't know that there's a right answer. My concern, and I think it's the concern of city staff, is that we're looking at budgets citywide. And if you move people off a site and keep it clean, and you end up having to abate somewhere else, it's the same cost to the city, whether you're abating at the airport site or along Guadalupe River, which is particularly sensitive. And there's an environmental issues with people being displaced. So our fear is, without doing this right and carefully and getting people housed, we're just moving the problem to somewhere else. So if we can do this right and we can get more people housed and we can solve the problem, the root cause of the problem, that'll be more effective in my mind than trying to fence off each place in the city where we have a problem. But I don't know that I've been torn a little bit about this. We've joked a little bit about being on the fence about the fence. I mean, I think you can make the argument both ways, and most of us have struggled a lot on this issue. So we haven't heard the last of it. We're going to see in January how it's going, and then we might make the decision to put up the fence.
Well, and Commissioner Powell, I see your hand up there. Councilmember Cohen, I think the difference with other areas of the city compared to the area that we're dealing with here is that the FAA has come down and said, we need to keep this area clear of people, period. And we've abated it several times. I don't know how many times, but I know over the last 6 years that I've been on the commission, I've seen that area abated several times. And that's what I don't at all disagree with, doing this in a humane way. I think every one of us on this commission supports that. We appreciate the effort that's being made. We're simply saying, let's not turn around a year from now and have to redo this all over again. And, then we have not met our, our promises we made to the FAA as well. So I'll leave you with that. And I want to go to Commissioner Pyle.
Thank you, Chair. So my question, and I think the approach, it makes sense. We'll find out like you said, Councilmember Cohen, in 90 days, how it's working out the way it is now. But my question, we keep talking about uses for the humans, which is good in this area, but obviously then that you have the restrictions of the FAA and the Land Commission, or the Santa Clara County Land Commission. The question though is, what about, and this might be for Ryan or for the council member, what other uses are we looking at, in terms of, could we use it for solar generation? Could we use it for a percolation pond? And I say that with the idea being that, well, maybe then there's money from other sources, like the infrastructure bill to get money for solar, or from the water district. They might be able to tap into some of the taxpayer funds for water storage and so forth. But it just seems like whatever happens, whether it's fenced or what happens, it just seems like there's an opportunity here. And I just encourage, as you look at alternative uses, to think beyond just traditional park use. I mean, it could be a huge pond with fountains and stuff and whatever. So,
yeah, Commissioner Pyle, I'll go ahead and try to attempt to answer that. The water attraction is probably not appropriate because it attracts birds. And so anything that attracts birds, particularly water, is discouraged by the FAA. I know my light keeps on going out. But in the area,
before you go on there, well, what about approaches like San Francisco Bay or runways that are right in the ocean, on the water like that?
There's a very active bird mitigation programs that do go on in those type of airports. And at another airport I was at, there was a development that was proposing a pond, and we were requiring them either to net it or put in these, they're called bird balls that float on top of the water, which kind of distracts from the purpose of having a pond. Water at the end of the runways is probably not a really good solution. Solar, possibly. Yeah, we have to go through certain studies on glare and if there's any glare, but there are airports that have put solar
Fresno, I think, yeah.
on the approach or on structures in the approach, as long as the glare study showed it didn't, there wasn't glare upwards to the pilot's approach or vision. I did pull up the inner safety zone uses. It did say anything that attracts relatively few people. So it just very light minimum passive uses in that area. Farming is potential in a lot of airports, agricultural uses. And then we do have a community garden already in that area, south of Asbury, I believe. And then there's the garden south of Asbury that you can wander through. But again, they're all very few people, doesn't attract a large group of people all in one location. So, but we always can think of interesting things that can go there. And as Matthew pointed out, possibly something even like Frisbee golf, dog parks, things that are few people.
And we're talking about potentially partnering with private funders and other ways of getting funding. And so, you know, the master plan exists, but that doesn't mean it's not changeable. But just like we have master plans in a few parts of the city for large parks that aren't yet funded, this is just that same situation. Obviously, that's what Commissioner Connolly was talking about. I mean, you know, we can be skeptical about whether we can get it done, or we can be optimistic that we can work on ways to provide funding to get it done. I always like to think that there's ways to do it if there's a will for it.
Commissioner Pyle, did you have any other comments?
No, other than I think I just want to echo council members' statement that, you know, let's be creative here, right? In how that land is used, and making sure that first and foremost, the safety of all are, you know, is the priority.
So Councilmember Cohen, and I don't know, I mean, I have strong feelings, obviously, on this issue, because I don't want to see us have to go through this again. This has been a painful process for the city, for the airport. And I'm always a believer in do it once, do it right, get it done. And then when we have a better plan for an area, then, you know, the fencing can come down and we don't have millions of dollars annually going out. If there was a strong feeling on behalf of this commission, and I don't know that there is, but if there were, would it be helpful for us to have that known by city council? We won't meet until February. Again, this will probably be dealt with in January, I would guess. But if the commission felt that we wanted to support the airport's, you know, option number one and send that message to council, is that something that you would encourage regardless of the, you know, your position on the issue?
For sure, I certainly encourage that input. I think that that's a good role for the commission to play, is to send your comments, whether that is as a commission as a whole or as individual commissioners. And I believe this item would be on the agenda on January 12th. At least that's the plan currently, although I don't know for sure if it'll happen on that date. But, you know, pay attention and be willing to come into the meeting and provide your comments. I
appreciate that. And I appreciate your input on this issue. It's an important issue to all of us. And, you know, maybe none of us have the right, you know, position on it, but we're all doing the best we can to find the best solution so we don't have to mitigate the encampments again. Having said that, I would like to know from members of the commission, because I'm strongly supportive of us echoing option number one that the airport recommended. We didn't get a chance to comment on that before it went to council. And I'd like to know where our commission members stand on this. And if there is a strong feeling of support for the airport's position for option number one, then it would appear that it would be appropriate for us to say so and send something on to City Council, as we won't meet again until February 14th.
Dan, let me chime in. This is Mr. Baines.
Yes, sir.
I have a suggestion. If we can lease that space and to a third party, like a contractor, and they can storage just like a storage area, and they can also put the fence at their own cost, like leasing that, and that will be benefit because they won't be living there. They will be just like a storage area for their material and equipment, and they are responsible to maintain that.
Director Ross, do you have any input on an idea like that? And then Commissioner Head, we'll go to you once we're finished with Commissioner Baines.
We'll be willing to hear all different ideas. Storage yards are a permittable use. So we'd be willing to hear all different ideas.
Great. Again, this is something that needs to, we need to come up with something if we're going to submit something, from this meeting for council on the 12th of January. Commissioner Head.
Chair Connolly, it seems to me that I'll build on the remarks I made earlier, that the council has taken a path of choosing not to build a fence at this time, but looking by setting a date in council as to review their activity to see if that's a good idea as it works out in the practical realm. And if that occurs in the early part of middle part of January or the early part of February, we would have the benefit of discussing our options or our thoughts at the meeting in February, having gotten back input from the council. And if the council has not had input at that point in time, we would be able then with an idea of discussion that we've not really had a chance to do tonight, although it may still occur, I understand that. But I think that an action by the commission tonight, until we've gotten feedback from the position that the council has taken, is premature, and then we ought to see what happens. There's certainly fencing that is has worked in situations where it hasn't. And I think Councilmember Cohen indicated that it was not an easy decision to come down on one side or the other. I think we give the council the time to play that out so that they have an idea of what's going on. And then we would also, because it's unclear to me that the fencing is absolutely a certain solution as I know, Dan, you feel about it. It's a pathway that might be a solution, but I don't see it as an absolute certain solution. And the other thing I think we have to take into account is we need to be concerned about the city-wide aspect, not just the airport aspect. We sit on a city commission focused on the airport, but it is still a city commission. The airport serves the whole city. The city benefits from the airport. It's a healthy civic symbiosis.
Thank you, Commissioner Head. Is there any other comments from the commission as to whether or not we should look at endorsing the airport's option number one this evening? Or do we simply take a pass on this and let the city deal with it? Hearing none, then we will move on to item 7B, the electronic billboards report and potential action there. Matthew.
Thank you. There we go. So there's going to be a number of different people presenting for this topic. I'll kick us off here and then turn it over to some of the other staff who will do it. What I wanted to do is to take a moment to sort of reset the conversation on this item for us. At the last commission meeting, there are a lot of questions, input, and feedback that still needed to be processed before the commission could have an informed and robust conversation about this topic. At our August 9th meeting, the EIR public comment period had just started. It ran from July 26th and ended on August 25th. Now that the public comment period of the EIR has finished and that report has been published and the comments have been published, we have a greater breadth and depth of information available to the commission and to the public. I also wanted to review quickly how the city staff got here. In 2017 and 2018, the City Council held a series of meetings on billboards, which resulted in the adoption of Council Policy 6-4. During this process, city staff conducted a series of outreach meetings, including community meetings, focus groups, and discussions with LIC Observatory. It was also heard by multiple public bodies, including the Santa Clara County's Airport Land Use Commission, the San Jose Planning Commission, the San Jose Community and Economic Development Committee, and the San Jose City Council. This item has been on the City Council priority list for a number of years. It was only recently removed from the city roadmap as it was determined that sufficient progress had been made as reflected in a February 2021 memo. Earlier this year, there was a discussion at a council strategy session. In that discussion, the council voted to have billboards on public sites move forward and pause the allowing of billboards on private sites. I provide this information only as context. The airport is not the expert on the history and policy changes on billboards. The city council sets these policies and priorities for the city. The airport city staff have been working hard to follow these directions and priorities set for us by the San Jose City Council. Airport staff have also worked to go above and beyond in the process of this project, especially to be open and inclusive. We went beyond in conducting a public comment period, not required for an EIR addendum, and in our responses to that report. Many of the questions that were submitted during the EIR process were outside the scope of the environmental review, yet staff made efforts to answer these questions nonetheless. I also want to note that the City Council also directs the airport to be fiscally strategic and responsible in how we manage and balance the airport's budget. It's their direction to always look for opportunities to be cost effective and to minimize the fiscal impact on residents. The airport regularly tries to generate non-aeronautical revenue to help offset the cost of running an airport. As a reminder, the airport does not use local tax money to operate. The airport is an enterprise fund and as such needs to be self-sustaining. Revenue to run the airport comes from multiple sources: the airlines, airfield activity, passenger facility charges, parking, concessions, and yes, advertising. The proposed billboards will generate a minimum of nearly $2.5 million over the term of the project. This is $2.5 million that does not need to be collected from other operations, such as through higher parking rates or higher charges to the airlines, nor is this money that needs to be cut from our operations by delaying projects or decreasing passenger services. This is the revenue that the airport can certainly use given the recent pandemic. As you heard earlier in this presentation, earlier in tonight's meeting from Assistant Director Ross, our passenger levels are still off by nearly 40% from the 2019 peaks that we had. I also want to take a moment to thank the public for the interest in this topic and the many questions submitted through the EIR process. The public's input and insight helped provide many important information to us in the mitigation process. I also want to thank the airport staff for their hard work and dedication. I'm going to now turn the presentation over to Rebecca Bray, who is the Senior Property Manager for the airport, to provide you with some additional details about the project itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Rebecca Bray, Senior Property Manager of Concessions at the Mineta San Jose Airport. The purpose of me coming to you today is to share on a very high level a summary of the project plan with Clear Channel to install 2 electronic signs on airport property located at 2200 and 2341 Airport Boulevard. As a reminder, these 2 signs are separate from any process that the city is undergoing for electronic signs, and the city's electronic sign project will not be addressed here. So as a means of a background, the agreement between Clear Channel and the city allows Clear Channel, our advertising concessionaire, to propose additional marketing income opportunities at other locations on airport premises and delegates authority to the Director of Aviation to approve and execute a project plan. The project plan outlines the scope of the project, the term, and the proposed revenue to the city. On February 21st, 2020, the director approved the project plan for the entitlement, development, and operation of 3 outdoor digital advertising billboards located at 2200 and 2341 Airport Boulevard respectively, facing the 101 freeway, and one located at 1128 Coleman Avenue. On April 22nd, 2020, the airport and Clear Channel mutually agreed to remove the Coleman electronic sign due to safety concerns for the pilots on the approach into the airport. So the following terms of the agreement, as outlined in the project plan, were established for this project. They include that from the date of installation, the term will run through June 30th, 2027. The revenue to the airport is the greater of 55% of gross revenue or minimum annual guarantee of $300,000 on the northern location and $190,000 for the southern location. And it's for a total guaranteed revenue of $490,000 per year for both signs. That's an estimated $2.4 million over the remaining 5 years of the term. The capital investment is zero on the part of the city, and the concessionaire Clear Channel will be responsible to incur all capital investment costs. Another benefit to this is is marketing, and that the airport can utilize up to 10% of the advertising time, specifically for promoting awareness and use of our airport at no cost to the airport. And these advertising opportunities are sorely needed to drive awareness and remain competitive against our two neighboring airports that are less than an hour's drive away from San Jose. So the airport is utilizing, the airport is utilizing a small footprint of approximately 300 square feet of unused area per location to generate very significant financial benefits. These terms are significantly higher than standards for the outdoor advertising industry. But in this circumstance, because of the airport's agreement with Clear Channel, we're able to leverage that to get a higher revenue percentage due to our existing indoor advertising agreement with the airport. So this revenue share of 55% is the highest in the Bay Area and is unprecedented in the advertising industry. This is very important given the revenue losses that have been incurred since COVID at the airport. And this additional revenue can help us offset some of those losses. Other terms and conditions in the agreement include that Clear Channel would be responsible for the management and maintenance of electronic signs, that Clear Channel would provide a 24/7 contact number, and the airport can coordinate with Clear Channel to adjust the lighting if requested. The airport would be responsible for reviewing and approving all advertisements. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. The two signs, as you can see here, are located at 2200 and 2341 Airport Boulevard, both facing the 101 freeway. One is located in the FedEx parking lot, and the other is in a grassy area behind the economy parking lot adjacent to the 101 freeway. These locations were selected because they are part of the locations identified in Attachment A of Council Policy 6-4, which identified locations throughout the city, including 4 sites on airport property in the airport influence area. And these locations were environmentally cleared for additional commercial signage. One thing to note about these 2 sites is that they are not located near businesses or residential areas, and they will generate large amounts of revenue in an area with limited uses. Next slide, please. So real briefly, I just want to review over Council Policy 6-4 and what its purpose is. The purpose is to state council policy regarding existing and future use of signs, including billboards, programmable electronic signs, and signs displaying off-site commercial speech on city-owned land. To provide guidance regarding the implementation of a program that may allow signs, including billboards, programmable electronic signs, and signs displaying off-site commercial speech on city-owned land, and to confirm the city's continued interest in regulating signs on city-owned land to promote an aesthetically pleasing environment. Included in that policy are guidelines that, at a minimum, limitations on the location, number, type, size, and height of signs, including illumination requirements. It establishes message limitations that the city may impose on signs. It identified 17 designated sites, of which 4 are on airport property, and describes the process for the approval of signs. Clear Channel and airport staff have followed the process to install 2 free-standing digital billboard structures on freeway-facing city-owned airport sites as outlined in this policy. The signs are located in the airport influence area and will conform to illumination requirements as specified in the municipal code and meet all federal aviation administration criteria along with the California Department of Transportation regulations. So although Council Policy 6-4 environmentally cleared the locations in the airport influence area for additional commercial signage, paragraph 2 of the sign approval process in that same policy requires development-specific environmental clearance under CEQA, and the Planning Department released the EIR addendum on November 2nd. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Sheehan to discuss the EIR addendum.
Yeah, good evening. Quick recap on the addendum to the EIR, the process that we followed. So the addendum and all submittals were reviewed by PBCE and the airport department as a standard. One thing we did do, and it was mentioned before, is that we posted the EIR addendum for public comment, even though it was not required, to ensure that we got all of those public comments through the process. As Rebecca mentioned, those were posted publicly, all the response to comments on November 1st. And we did receive 197 questions, and all questions were responded to, even those questions that didn't raise any issues with the environmental analysis. And the mitigation measures were found to be sufficient. Next slide.
Thank you, Ryan. So real briefly, we just want to review with you what is going to council. Currently, we are planning to go to council on November 30th, and we're going to ask City Council to adopt a resolution to approve the addendum to the amendment to the Airport Master Plan Environmental Impact Report, and to conduct a public hearing regarding the project plan for 2 outdoor advertising digital billboards in order to fulfill the public noticing requirement under the policy 6-4. These 2 actions will allow Clear Channel to proceed forward with the process to install 2 freestanding electronic signs, as well as meet the requirements as outlined in the policy. This project, as Matthew stated, aligns with City Council priorities for electronic billboards to generate revenue for the city and support city-owned facilities, programs, or services through the use of advertising space, and meets the city's desire to generate revenue and support city services through electronic signs. It also aligns with city's 2021 enterprise priorities to invest in the airport and to expand revenue opportunities to minimize the impact of fee payers. I will now turn it back over to Matthew Kasmersack.
Dan, if you'd like to open it up to public comments at this time, we're finished with our presentation.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open it up to the public. If we have members of the public that would like to speak on this issue, please raise your hand or notify Matthew Kasmersack so that you can speak.
I believe you can use the raise your hand function within Zoom to address this, or hit *9 if you're on the phone. I have one person with their hand raised, Jason Him. Jason, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jason, representing the No Digital Billboards in San Jose group. We sent an email to the commission on November 3rd as part of the public comment for this topic, outlining some points and concerns we'd like to bring to the commission's attention. First, we recommend not to approve the staff report because we believe that by approving that staff report that was just presented, you send the message that the Airport Commission is rubber stamping the electronic billboards project to proceed. We also recommend the commission to submit a letter to the City Council opposing the project and to halt any further work on this item, which was actually deprioritized back in February. There was a memo submitted to the commission for this meeting by Matthew dated October 29th, referencing the electronic billboards as being priority number 3 on the council priorities of 2020-2021 fiscal year. However, on the February 22nd meeting of this year, Mayor Liccardo and Councilmember Peralez submitted memos to the council to deprioritize all work on electronic billboards, which was part of the larger motion of halting phase 2 work, and was approved in lieu of, dealing with COVID-19 priorities at the time. Just a few other quick things. In the same email, we mentioned that the responses to the comments to the addendum of the environmental report more or less concludes there was no subsequent EIR that was needed to be prepared. We encourage you to review the responses to all the different people that responded, that issued comments, including some of the commissioners, starting on pages 13 to 24. Particularly, one example was claiming that there was no details regarding the proposed electronic signs at the time that the master plan was being developed. However, we've since come to learn that is not the case. And then lastly, if you haven't already reviewed our op-eds and articles posted, we included links to those articles. So we encourage you to take a look at our email. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hemp. Do we have another speaker?
You do. You have Les Nevitt.
Yeah, thanks. I'd like to urge you as an advisory body to send the message that special interests should not trump public interest, and the airport and the city don't belong in the billboard business. Look at how complicated this is and the overwhelming public opposition. Is this the path we want for our city? Starting from billboards at these airport sites, and then next in line are more than 20 billboards on other public property along freeways and on landmark buildings. And then there are more in line for private property owners who will challenge the city and say they should have the same right to put up billboards. If you look at what has happened in Los Angeles, it's a legal quagmire with ongoing expense. The answer here is that all of this can be avoided by not starting down the road to putting up new billboards in San Jose. And tonight we are at that starting gate. And I just want to take you back to 1985 again, when the billboard ban was enacted, and a few quotes from Mercury News articles. Quote, "The Planning Commission did a 3-year study and determined that an abundance of billboards is, quote, visual blight. City officials said reducing this kind of conspicuous advertising will improve the overall appearance of the city, and this in turn will encourage economic development. Planning Department officials say the ordinance is designed to encourage the revitalization of downtown and major thoroughfares." And here's a quote from Gary Schoenauer, who you may remember was director of planning at that time when the billboard ban was enacted. He said, "The ban is an expression of a very strong commitment on the part of the city council to beautify the city. What was good for the environment and for business in 1985 is still good in 2021, and new billboards should not be allowed to spoil San Jose. And once they go up, they're nearly impossible to take down." This is a really important point, a starting point for what's ahead of us. And you have to consider it comprehensively, not just in the context of 2 billboards at the airport. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Levitt. Do we have other speakers?
You do not have any other speakers at this time.
All right. Seeing no other speakers, I want to open it up to our airport commissioners to speak on this topic. I can't see any hands at this point. Matthew, could you bring up maybe the...
There are no hands raised at this time. Although, hold on a second, let me see if there's any analog hands that are risen. I do see an analog hand. Go ahead, Commissioner Hendricks.
Okay. I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into this project, but I have to question one thing that really, really troubles me, Matthew, is you read a whole host of agencies that the city worked with from 2017 to 2018, and never once was the Airport Commission mentioned in that list of agencies and people that had a legitimate right to know. And I think that the Airport Commission is one of those bodies that was overlooked. And I know that because I found a memo from 2019 that listed 4 parcels that were designated as appropriate for possible installation of electronic billboards. That was in 2019. And then on the back page, it says commission input or recommendation, none required. Why was that? Why weren't we involved? Why weren't we given this information back in 2019 when this was clearly already rolling well before our master plan amendment was approved and finalized.
I'll see if someone from planning development wishes to speak up in this. In large part, just to note is that this project and the council policy that goes along with it were not driven by the airport. The billboard policy and council policy went through the Community and Economic Development Committee of the City Council itself. The airport did not manage this process, so I can't speak to specifically those aspects of it, but I'll let the planning staff, if they want to speak to it.
Matthew, can you bring up the photos of everyone so I can see folks?
Sure.
Here? Thank you. No one else from the city?
There we go. Hold on one second.
So I'm David Keon, Principal Planner with Environmental Review. So I wasn't involved in that outreach that occurred, but due to the ordinance team did do outreach as part of that effort, as part of that phase for the ordinances for the phase 1 billboards. So that was done as part of the outreach. And so because, I can't respond as to why the Airport Commission wasn't included in that outreach, but there was a broad-based outreach that was done as part of that effort.
And I believe the effort was done through the Office of Economic Development, correct?
Office of Economic Development and through the Planning Department.
Yeah.
Okay, so they just skipped over the Airport Commission, right? That's fair to say that our input at the time wasn't welcome or wasn't desired, which is really unfortunate because there's 4 parcels here on this list, generated by the airport or not. We still had a reason to know that 4 parcels were selected back in 2019, which leads me to, I know that I've been told multiple times that the master plan doesn't include little itty bitty projects. And so therefore it wasn't appropriate to include these signs in the master plan, yet it's driving a budget. And I mean, you're going to be factoring that money into your future budgets. And I think it was an opportunity to include it in the master plan back in, for the amendment back in 2020. So I'm disappointed that we were overlooked. And then I wanted to know, where's my other notes? Bear with me here. Back buried in the summary of public comments, and I appreciate that assembly of responses because that was a huge effort to respond to 197 individual comments like that. So that was a huge undertaking, but buried in there, I learned that one of the sign locations was mapped incorrectly in the July proposal and was corrected in the September revision of that same document. So my question is, the FAA, you have to submit a notice of proposed construction or alteration on an airport form. Was the FAA given the proper coordinates, knowing that this sign actually moved again after, at least by date, after the FAA was notified? So I just wanted to make sure that FAA has 100% complete information on that sign because there's been no notice, final determination notice issued for that location, at least that I can find. So is the latitude and longitude for the sign that's going to infringe on a riparian corridor and kill 43 trees, are the right, does the FAA have the proper information to make a decision? I know they're not the end all be all on this, but I want to make sure that information is accurate.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yes, the FAA does have the correct information. It was originally submitted and approved when it was still located, as you mentioned, infringing on the riparian corridor. It was then relocated and resubmit it to the FAA, and that's still currently under review. So they do have all the information they need, but it needs to be reevaluated because the actual sign shifted in location.
Okay, great. So they have the most recent information. Okay, so that was my biggest concern. But I have to say that the process here has me a little bit concerned. I know there's no impact on aviation safety, so that's kind of our purview here. So I fault the process more than the project. So anyways, that's all I have to say. I just want to make sure everyone's got the right information.
Other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, Commissioner Empire.
Yeah, thank you.
I couldn't see you.
Oh, that's okay. So I have a couple of questions. The business case will be one that I'll get to in a moment, but on the EIR, and thank you for answering the non-EIR questions as part of that. But a couple that I had that I think weren't really answered, or perhaps it was because they were misunderstood, but there was one that referred to a policy, MS-16.2, I think it is. And I think, I can't even remember what agency that policy comes from now without looking at the footnotes. But basically, I think it said, look at different alternatives for use of that land. And that's what I was getting at, is we are saying, okay, it's going to be used for these signs, but did we look at something else? And that example was solar panels. So solar energy, so we could actually produce energy instead of consuming energy. That was got to the second part of the question. That was one question. The other related question was, by my calculations, it looks like it is going to be the equivalent of about 20 houses worth of electricity that these things will use. And to me, that seems like a significant impact. It wasn't really addressed in the response, but 20 houses maybe it's not that big a deal, but if suddenly the city converts all the billboards, and say there's 150 digital billboards in the city, all the public and all the private sites go to digital, that's the equivalent of adding 3,000 homes, which is pretty significant, I think. It's like a small town. So those were two comments that, and this is on page 19 of the EIR response. So those were kind of two comments on the EIR that I just wanted to throw out there. I don't know if you want to comment on those or if I should keep going.
So I could respond to where that MS, that's a general plan policy that refers to general plan policies. And in terms of the threshold of significance for energy use, which is, I think, is what you're getting at regarding the 20, equivalent to 20 houses, that is, so for CEQA, how we evaluate is if the project is going to result in a wasteful use of energy. So if the design of the project is in such a way that it's going to result in a wasteful use of energy, then that would be a significant impact. However, just because a project is using a lot of energy, but if it's using compliant of building code and has measures that would reduce the amount of energy use already built in, then it would not be considered to be a wasteful use of energy. So a good example of this is data centers. Data centers are energy hogs. However, if they have everything measured, everything in place in order to, reduce the amount of energy use to within what would be considered a normal range for that type of use, it wouldn't be considered to be a wasteful use of energy.
That's an interesting thing, because if I can get advertisements on here, then why do I need them elsewhere, right? So maybe that's a waste to have it up there. But to the business case of it, from a revenue perspective, and I realize this wasn't part of the EIR, so I appreciate you answering the responses that we did get from that. And this is where it seems, back to Commissioner Hendrick's point, that we should have been involved in the business process earlier. We're seeing, revenue of minimum guarantee of 490,000, maybe that goes up. Clearly it doesn't go below that, and that's the revenue side. And clearly there's no capital investment from the airport. I do have to question expenses. It seems like, gosh, the overhead of just you guys having to deal with us and deal with all the hours and hours you've spent just trying to deal with this. And obviously these are one-time things, but it seems like there would still be some overhead costs associated with that would have to be put in that equation. And and even if, and then there's the other thing, there's the risks of things that I still, again, they were in the EIR questions because that was the form we had, but I still have questions about indemnification, and there was an answer in the EIR and it pointed me to a policy the council adopted in 2007, which led to another PDF, which didn't open. So I never really understood how Clear Channel would indemnify the airport. But to the point of, if someone's driving down the road, they get distracted, and whether or not they really are distracted, San Jose is the deep pocket, right? So, that $400,000 might go to a settlement pretty quickly if it's an accident, or if, there's some other circumstances there. So on the business equation, forgetting all that, assuming we got the 490,000 revenue per year, I believe our revenues back in pre-COVID days were about 229 million. So I think that's about 0.2% or 0.2%, addition, if you will. So from a passenger fee, I think we're talking maybe what, 0.2 or 2 pennies, maybe, I guess 2 pennies out of $10 passenger fee. Is that the kind of numbers we're looking at here for as far as the impact on revenue?
Sorry, it would being in, so if it brought in $500,000 a year, and again, I don't know what the passenger count is this year, but at the height of the time, it was about 14 million passengers. So,
well, I'm just, if we do 500,000 revenue and our baseline is 200 million, say, I mean, I think that's about 2.5 cents, equivalent of a $10. I think it's about 0.25%. But I'm wondering, have you guys done that calculation to, what is that? I stated it in my question, but in the EIR, but
we can figure out the math if you give us a second.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
And that's kind of the, kind of what are we looking at relative speaking?
Yeah, while somebody calculates that, I would just indicate that, going back to your insurance issues, in all our leases, all tenants indemnify the city of any actions that may occur with their leasehold. And we also require insurance as prescribed by our city risk management. So they all carry extensive insurance, and they're all indemnify the city of different actions. So is a very, very strong indemnification and very strong insurance requirements in each of those lease agreements.
But when it's an externality, like someone driving down the road, and they claim they got distracted or whatever, I'm just curious if it would cover that kind of thing. But it's for the lawyers, I guess.
Okay. And then also regarding the per passenger costs, the formulas on the per passenger are very, very complex. So you could probably take just a rough what our passengers are at divided by the $500,000. But I would just caution you that passenger formula is very complex, and it's set by the airline lease agreements. So to get a true passenger costs would take some work to complete. But if you want to just do a straight calculation, we can do that unless somebody did that.
I'm just thinking, $1 million would be if we had $100 million revenue and we had airport revenue and $1 million from this, then that would be 1%, and so it's basically like 0.5% or 1/4% or whatever. But we don't need to dwell on it.
Okay.
I mean, Commissioner Powell, this is Kim Hawk, Deputy Director of Finance. I did pull up our fiscal year 22 budget, and it's about 149 million in revenues. So it's about 0.3% if you take the $500,000 against that.
Okay. So yeah, it'd be about 3 cents or something if you had a $10 passenger fee. Again, we're up plus or minus on that, obviously, but
right.
It is just to put things in perspective. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Hoff.
Commissioner Gupta.
Commissioner Gupta.
Hi, thank you, everybody. First of all, great work, everybody around the airport staff in all the team at the commissioner office. I wanted to voice or back on what Ken just mentioned. So 0.3%, is that a good enough value for this whole project? That adds up to the line item. Let's say if there is an accident, who gets the liability? Let's say if I crash my car, do I sue Clear Channel, or do I sue City of San Jose, or do I sue Airport? That would be something that I would really make sure that we are very clear on, because one car crash costs a lot of money. Not even bringing up the life value on it. So make sure that is accounted for.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta. Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Smith, would you like to unmute yourself? I know you're trying. It's hard to find sometimes. Matthew, can you?
Yep, she's ready.
Where's that button? There we go.
My question is, in speaking of the loss of income that the San Jose airport's lost since COVID, how does the San Jose airport compare to, I won't say San Francisco, but say Oakland or Sacramento? Is it specifically San Jose losing more money, or is it just kind of right in line with the other smaller airports? Because it makes me wonder, people, believe me, planes are full. But I do notice when I fly in and out of San Jose that, we have all these empty gates and whatnot. And so what are some of the reasons behind that? If when I go to other airports, they're completely packed. This is the heart of Silicon Valley. And I know not everybody is still flying, but believe me, a lot of people are flying again.
So that's a great question. The Bay Area airports are all down significantly compared to other airports across the country. Again, San Jose is still down by 40% compared to where we used to be in 2019 in terms of the number of passengers that are coming through. And you do have airports, and you've pointed this out, in other regions of the country that are nearly back to where they were in 2019. So things have been lagging for us, and it's not just us. And I think San Francisco is slightly worse. And that's only in part because they have international travel, and that literally just returned today. But I don't know, Assistant Director Ross, did you want to?
During COVID, all airports across the country were hit really hard. And that's why our different associations lobbied really hard to get the CARES Act, the CRISIS Act, and the ARPA Act to help airports through the COVID periods. Now, as recovery is going, we see this central portion of the United States is probably recovering the quickest. And we have the two coastal areas that are lagging as far as recovery. And as you mentioned, you are seeing planes full. However, the planes are full, but we don't have as many flights. So it's fewer choices in which they can take that flight. So consequently, the planes are full. But at the end of the day, in 2019 and before, we were about 50% business and 50% leisure travel. The travelers right now are predominantly leisure travel. And for us and for those airports that were heavy business travel, we're the ones that are lagging because a lot of businesses have not been sending their employees on travel. and how that's going to recover. We hope that's going to recover the first quarter of next year. However, technology has also stepped into play, like we're on a Zoom meeting and there's Teams and other virtual ways that people are connecting, and businesses are connecting to do their work right now. So it's going to be an interesting event to see how that comes back. We are working on a active marketing program, an outreach program to business travel agencies to help encourage them to use SJC in their business travel. So we're not just watching, we're actively in a marketing effort for that. We've had several airlines come through to see what we've been doing over COVID and how we've changed our protocols to address various COVID and health related matters. So we're actively engaging with the business community and the travel managers in hopes that it will help attract them back to flying. That I think the business traveler is going to be one of the last areas that recovers, but we have seen leisure travel is what the strong market is right now.
One thing to point out as well with that is that it also propagates through to other revenue streams such as concessions and other areas, because business travelers often were willing to spend more because they were traveling on an expense account, whereas leisure travelers tend to be more economical about their choices. And they also tend to be more than just one person. So if you have one person taking a taxi versus a family taking a taxi or an Uber ride, those types of things. So that propagates through to other revenue streams that the airport has as well.
It just seems to me with all the opposition of this, electronic billboard, someone mentioned earlier, pardon me that I don't remember which person, but you start with 2 of these and then the next thing you know, there's more and more. And then it is, when you go to Los Angeles, it is electronic billboard, everywhere. And and then it starts looking, this is down the road, but it starts looking like Las Vegas. And is this really what we want for our city? It affects, the environment as far as birds. And, we've had people on our last meeting talk about different studies on the environment and just how many different species it affects. And also, I think what Commissioner Pyle was speaking of is my concern. We have so many people who are distracted driving as it is with their cell phones and, you name it. And it's, we all drive around here on the 101 and the various freeways. And it's a constant state of accidents and pileups. And I totally believe that if people stop and have to look at a policeman giving a ticket on the side of the road and that drives a traffic jam, I can just see it now with people looking up and, boy, that looks good. And, the next thing they know, they're rear-ending or whatever. And I think that we will see down the road, I think Commissioner Pyle also mentioned, well, who would get the, the blame for this as far as the bill on a lawsuit? Well, let me tell you, a lawyer is going to go after every single, everybody who is involved, the city, the airport, everybody. And I just think it to me, it's not a huge amount of money. And I just think that we could look for other ways to bring money in. And I don't think that this is it. I think it's kind of, just kind of really almost, for lack of better words, a sad state of affairs that this is what we've come down to try to get some money. And it's not really a lot. So that's my thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Do we have other commissioners that would like to comment? I just saw Commissioner Gupta.
Yeah, as Lisa said, there is a very bright electronic billboard when you are going to San Francisco from San Jose, right by IKEA. And every single time I drive by it, it is really annoying. I mean, it is never pleasantry. It is always distracting, even though when you are driving, with your good focus. And as you said, with all the given distraction, we already have, with all the substance abuse drivers, with all the electronic abuse drivers, with all the kids, who are just turning into driving, that would be a bigger factor for me than a few $100,000 when it's only accounting for 0.3% of the total revenue.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta. Do we have any other commissioners that would like to speak on the issue? I'd like to take the opportunity then.
You have Commissioner Hendricks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see her. Commissioner Hendricks, go ahead.
And I just have one more comment on the whole sign issue. For the following reasons, I believe that the city of San Jose flawed in the process right out of the gate. They are not going by their own municipal code 23, Title 23. The airport's designated as a special sign zone, and the signs that we're proposing don't fall, the size doesn't fall in those parameters. I don't think the city is following their own municipal code. And I don't understand how that can be. The municipal code states that it's subject to this airport's master plan. This is not in the master plan. And it could have been because the wheels were churning back in 2017, 2018, and the amendment came out for the master plan in 2020. So Lick Observatory seems to have been dismissed. The public outcry, I have not seen one public opinion in favor of this project. The revenue generated from this is minuscule, almost not worth the time. And I just feel that this whole process, besides the environmental impacts and the birds and the trees, this project needs to be put on the back burner and then never surfaces again. I don't want the city of San Jose looking like Las Vegas. I don't want the city of San Jose to look like Los Angeles. We have a beautiful city. And if we allow 2, we're going to have to allow a lot more. And part of the program that said that you're supposed to get rid of 4 static boards for every electronic board that goes up, but we're not following that guideline. I don't see 4 signs going down and when 2 go up. So 8 should come down. So I don't understand the logic, I guess. So because of all those concerns that I have, I will be taking a no support position on the electronic billboard sign.
Thank you, Commissioner Hendricks. I'll go ahead and, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Dan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner
I have
Payne,
just only, yes, I have just only one request to the council that they can look, I know they want to generate the revenue, they can look some other sources, and if they want to display the message, there are other devices they can use and to compromise this one. So instead of putting this billboard sign, they can see some other alternates and they can do the same thing, whatever they want.
Thank you, Commissioner Baines. I've made some notes here. I've actually gone back and forth on this issue several times. I, at one point in time, advertised on a billboard in San Jose. I couldn't afford to be on a main thoroughfare because we're a small business, but I found one over on West San Carlos and that had been vacant for ages. And so I called up and made a deal to advertise her for 6 months. So the benefit to me as a business owner is that, geez, now I don't have to run a billboard for 6 months. I can have 1 minute out of 8 minutes that rotates on a billboard. So I like that. The 3 in Milpitas are attractive. I was told we didn't have any electronic billboards in San Jose other than advertising what was on site. But at 101 and 880, there's 2 obnoxiously bright billboards that do turn off at midnight. And I'm not sure where those came from. I've heard that maybe they're not legal billboards at this point. But I do want to talk about the process here and my disappointment. And this is not the first time that I've expressed the disappointment in the process, is that I read a letter that basically said construction was to begin March of 2021. That's before this was ever even brought up to the Airport Commission. When I asked for information about this, I was told no information was available. That's why it hadn't been brought to the commission. Obviously, that's not a factual statement because there was information going back a couple of years over this, and the Airport Commission is the last, as usual, to find out about a project like this. So I have a real problem with transparency and the process as a whole. I travel that 101 corridor at De La Cruz almost every day and have nearly avoided accidents several times because it's probably the worst intersection between De La Cruz and 87 in the entire San Jose area for off-ramps. I don't know who at Caltrans decided that that was a good process, but I see accident after accident after accident there and have nearly been in them myself. And so I am concerned about further distractions at that point because it is a very, very busy area. At the same time, I can see why someone would want to advertise there because it is a very busy area. I've had the opportunity to be up at Lick Observatory and look through their telescopes and view the ambient light from the city from up there, which is significant. And I can't imagine with the astronomical research that goes on up there that it would be something that would be a good thing to eventually have a bunch of billboards that are lighted, having additional ambient light. More importantly, Commissioner Hendricks brought up a point, and I looked this up, where 4 billboards were supposed to be eliminated in San Jose for every 1 electronic billboard. And then through some quiet process, apparently it went down to 2 billboards would be eliminated for 1 electronic billboard. But then it went even further and said, well, we'll eliminate 2 somewhere in the state of California for every 1 electronic billboard. That doesn't seem to go well as far as I'm concerned. There are, I think the 3 billboards along the 880 corridor in Milpitas are attractive billboards. No one can dispute that, but I'm concerned about the fact that really we're not going to lose any billboards. And I know we're focused on the airport, but let's be honest. We are, whatever happens here is going to happen in the rest of the city. I truly believe that. More importantly, I really feel like, and I don't have anything against Clear Channel. I love the advertising that goes on inside the airport. I think it's really outstanding. But I feel like there was a real lack of competitive bidding that took place here and a real lack of opportunity as well. And so that lack of opportunity, the lack of transparency in this process, which I hope the airport staff would take to heart, because we do, I believe I speak on behalf of every one of the airport commissioners, we do want to be a good partner with you. But the last thing we want to do is feel like we have been left out of the process and that we're simply going to rubber stamp whatever comes our way. Working with us would always garner a better outcome, I believe. And providing information to us in a timely fashion would have been very helpful. I've read every single one of the letters that have come in from both the August meeting and the November meeting. Not a single citizen in San Jose has spoke up saying we want electronic billboards. So what do we as a commission, do we simply ignore the public on this issue? Those are the things that I have gone back and forth on and am not comfortable with the process. And based on that grounds, I can't support the process. But I want to, I believe that that there are other commissioners that haven't had a chance to speak, and I want everyone to be able to weigh in on this issue. So I want to go to Commissioner Head just to see if you've got any thoughts on this, sir. You go back to a period of time on the council that was very much against billboards, and I think any input you have would be helpful to the commission in making a decision on this.
Thank you, Chair Connolly. As I shared with the commission at our last meeting, the question of billboards was a live question when I was on council, and my own personal position was that we should have active and energetic signing on buildings where the business took place, where that the billboard or the sign activated, and that off-site billboards should not be a part of our ongoing city activity. I still believe that way, but the council has changed that policy, did it several years ago. So I find myself not supporting the council policy, and as an independent citizen, that's great to be able to live in a country where you could do that. So I would not be supportive of moving ahead with electronic billboards on the airport. And I do that for the reason of the public policy. I just don't believe in off-site billboard advertising for the city of San Jose. But the council has a policy that supports that. So our no vote, among other things, would recommend that the council reconsider their policy.
Thank you for your input, Commissioner Head. I don't think we've heard from Commissioner Henkin. Did we lose him?
Nope, you haven't lost me. Sorry about that. I was just unmuted. I'm going to probably be, I think, looking at it in a little bit different way. I'm going to be supporting, or when the question comes up, I'll be supporting staff recommendation, both on the environmental addendum as well as the project. And I think Commissioner Head stated, something that's important. It's a council policy that's already been revisited, and I think has given staff direction to move forward in that sense of looking at these various aspects. It will provide economic benefit, which I think we have to look and always look at it citywide and even airport specific. That's number one. But it also provides some sort of additional identity. And I think staff has brought that up in terms of separating ourselves from some of the other regional airports around. It's not a significant amount of money, but it's something I think that certainly does help. I think the indemnity question that came up, I think has been addressed, and it's going to be written in such a fashion that Clear Channel takes on that liability. There are up and down 101 or any other freeway, I think there's a number of things that are necessarily distractions. Heck, planes coming off the runway going over 101 are somewhat of a distraction. But I think everything is being done, as I've read, consistent with city policies, state policies, federal policies, that this design is going to meet all those requirements. And then there was something else that was said, that there is some provisions in there to take a look at some of the design, the angle of the light, the brightness of the light, and some of those other aspects that can be adjusted throughout the life and the term of the lease of these things to make it more and more safe as we go forward. So with that said, I want to commend staff on I think a very detailed level of work that they did on the environmental, and I think they went above and beyond in terms of responding to the questions and citizen comments, and I do appreciate the citizen comments as well. But I think for some of the points that I brought up, I'm going to be supporting the proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner Henkin. Do we have anyone else on the commission that has not had a chance to weigh in on this issue? I'd like to go to Councilmember Cohen because obviously, Councilmember Cohen, there must have been some heated debate over issues. Some of this may have occurred prior to you coming on, but certainly I'd like you to just give us some city council perspective on where you think this whole program is going.
I actually don't have that perspective because all of this conversation happened before I was on council. So I can't say from firsthand experience where people will stand on this or what the views of the council are. And I haven't been in any conversation with anybody on the council yet about it. So I actually don't have an answer for your question. I haven't taken a position yet, and I'm listening to your input very carefully tonight as I prepare for the upcoming meeting when we have this conversation.
I appreciate your forthrightfulness on that, but I did want to give you an opportunity to weigh in. So we have in front of us potential action.
Connolly?
Yes, did I miss?
Commissioner Patel with the same.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Patel, please go ahead. My apologies for not seeing your hand raised.
No, I guess I did not hit the unmute button before you had asked there. So I did kind of go through and drive that 101 corridor during the nighttime, and not even a few miles away, just 2 exits, you'll see more electronic billboards right along as you're going southbound on 101. And one of those happens to be Clear Channel owned as well. So again, it kind of comes down to is does the cost justify what we're getting back? And I don't see the actual dollar amount that Clear Channel is investing into the installation of this. So it kind of goes into the transparency of how much are they investing into this versus how much we're getting back, because it does seem like a rather small amount. If it's $500,000 a year, I mean, if we're looking at things holistically, if we put a solar farm over where Guadalupe Gardens is, that's probably going to generate a little bit more than $500,000 a year. So I think that we need a little bit more clarity on this. I did hear a few objections along the process. On that, I can't fully comment. I've just been appointed a little over a year now. So I've been doing my share of Google research and pulling all sorts of memos up. And from a technical standpoint, the questions that were put in the EIR about the lighting were answered, and those were the concerns I had last meeting. So from that standpoint, I can't see a technical reason to be against the billboard proposal, but from a political aspect, I can kind of see the concerns of other commissioners.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Patel. Did I miss anyone else? Matthew, can you comment on these billboards that we saw at 880 and 101, and maybe because I don't want to speak out of turn on that, but we'd been told that there were no electronic billboards in San Jose other than for on-site advertising, and we've got 2 at 880 and 101.
I can't speak to those ones specifically. I do know that there is as referenced earlier, there's one at De La Cruz in 101 that is a similar size and configuration from Clear Channel that is already posted there.
Is that in the city of Santa Clara though, or San Jose?
Yes, that is the city of Santa Clara.
Okay.
So that is correct. But again, just in terms of people being able to, see what it would look like, it's there. I turn to city staff to see if there's anyone that knows anything about the other billboards.
Yeah, I don't have any knowledge of those billboards.
Okay, well, they are on would be the northbound side of, well, I guess it's kind of the northeastern side of, or northwestern side of 101. There's a roofing company, I think that's there. There's 2 of them. And I had just understood from the city that we didn't have any electronic billboards. And so I was just confused when we saw them right smack dab in the middle of those two intersections. They do turn off at midnight and come back on at 6 a.m. But I just, wanted clarification, because everything we've been told is that these would be the first two electronic billboards in the city of San Jose.
Under the new council policy, there might have been stuff that's grandfathered. Again, I'm not saying that these were, just clarifying that. Assistant Director Ross, it looked like you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that Westfield Mall does have an electronic billboard on 880. It's not generally the area that you're talking about, but there is one at the mall.
But that was for, and I did look at that. That is true. I saw a lot of on-site advertising going on, and I understand that is approved. So it's a moot point. We're dealing with the airport situation. So thank you very much. Any other additional comments? So we have potential action to either accept or reject the staff report on the environmental impact report and the project plan for electronic billboards at the airport. It is entirely up to this commission as to what they want to do. We can do nothing and not vote on the issue tonight. We can approve the staff report, or we can reject the staff report, or we can modify and have our own motion. Is there someone on the commission that would like to make a motion in that regard? I saw a hand for a brief second, and
Commissioner Pyles raised his hand.
yeah, Commissioner Pyle, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself, please.
I'll make a motion to reject the report, for the reasons I've stated earlier, but.
All right, there's a motion to reject the report. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Hendricks seconds the motion. It is open for discussion at this time.
I second as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Gupta. All right, hearing no discussion on the matter, Matthew Kazmierzak, would you please do a roll call vote?
Hold on a second. Did we have another comment by Commissioner?
I'm sorry.
I saw one hand jump up and then drop off. I was writing the motion. Nope. Okay.
No, that might have just been me lowering my hand.
Okay.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to reject the staff report on the environmental impact report and the project plan for electronic billboards at Mineta San Jose International Airport.
So a yay votes to reject, a nay votes to not reject.
Okay, so if you vote yes, you're rejecting. If you
Yes.
vote no, you are not rejecting.
Correct.
I just want everyone to understand that. All right, Mr. Kazmierzak, go ahead with the roll call vote.
Commissioner Smith? Commissioner Smith?
You'll all need to unmute yourself, please. So when we get to you, you can.
Yes, I vote to reject.
Okay. Commissioner Gupta?
I vote to reject.
Commissioner Henkin?
I vote no.
Commissioner Patel?
I vote no.
Commissioner Baines?
Yes.
Commissioner Hendricks?
Yes.
Commissioner Head?
Yes.
Commissioner Pyle?
Yes.
Commissioner Connolly?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, what was the totals on? I believe we had 2 no's, and what else did we have?
7 yeas.
7 yeas. So the motion passes to reject the staff report. We will move on to the next item of business, which capital projects update. Drew Niemeyer, our Airport Deputy Director of Planning and Development.
Good evening, Chair Connolly and Airport Commission. Drew Niemeyer, Planning and Development Airport Deputy Director. I'd like to provide you a capital program update on some of the projects that are in the pipeline. As you know, the pandemic impacted the airport significantly. The airport had made a prudent decision to defer many of our projects. Those that continued were deemed essential by the city and continued construction. And we'll talk about those. Those are the first two projects. But these are the other projects that are progressing in various different states of status, which you can see here. Those that have an asterisk are those that are FAA grant funded. Next slide, please. So the airport's pleased to report to the commission that the economy lot parking garage located in the northeast area of the airport was completed in July, and it added 900 net new parking spaces to our assets. Next slide, please. The ARF in the landside bay, which was discussed briefly earlier in the meeting, is approximately 17,500 square feet. We'll be completing that a month ahead of schedule, early December, and the ribbon cutting will be an exact date I don't have, but mid-January is the target date. Next slide. Two additional projects that are also co-located in the southwest area of the airport. The first is our southwest quadrant apron. That is located directly to the east of our new ARF facility. And the significance of this apron is that it was in a dilapidated condition, and we're having to complete that on the same schedule as the ARF facility. Otherwise, we would have some operational impacts where we would deliver the ARF building and then still be under construction with apron, which would block some of the ARF operations. So we're ensuring that that's not going to happen. This project progressed in advance of receiving an FAA grant, and that's because we had to mitigate the potential of operational. We'll go back and apply for our grant later on. The second project is same slide. Thank you. The GA run-up area is going to be located just to the northeast of the ARF facility, and that is for GA aircraft run-up to ensure that their engines are running up to power, the engine pressure and everything before they go onto the runway. That project is currently in design. We'll be submitting an application for a grant in April, and we will progress into construction provided that we receive an FAA grant. Next slide. The runway incursion mitigation program is part of a very large program that's going to be reconfiguring the airfield. It's approximately $171 million program, which is going to span over approximately 15 years. We show that in the top right corner image. The first phase of it is Taxiway Victor, which is located on the right. The overall Taxiway Victor is on the right slide, but the first phase that we're focusing on right now, we're in design. We'll be submitting a grant application in April, and we'll proceed into construction dates there for you. Next slide. Another project that we're progressing with are our ADA improvements to improve some of the accessibility at the airport. The project began at approximately $6 million. The scope is increased, and we've had to split it into 4 distinct prioritized phases because of the scale of the project increased. If we could go to the next slide. So there are 4 distinct phases. The first phase being the parking and the roadways area that is currently designed. It was bid and then rebid. We'll be starting construction spring of next year. The subsequent phases, as you can see, are spread over, and we'll be working through. We have all of those other phases are currently at 95% design. Will be completed in a staggered manner, and will complete all construction by 2024. Next slide, please. And the final project for our update is the new facilities building, which will also be located in the southwest area of the airport. It'll be a replacement to our existing facilities compound, which is currently a group of modular buildings located on the southeast area of the airport. We will be putting this back on the streets, advertising soon, and we're looking to start construction in Q4 of 22 once we make the award. And that concludes my update. I welcome any questions you may have.
We have questions from commissioners. All right.
Commissioner Patel.
Yeah. So I was going back, I think, to the first project that you have outlined. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, we're looking at Reed Hillview eventually, shutting down, unfortunately. And I did see a couple of improvements that were for the facilities, and I think there's a couple of taxiways. Could you elaborate a little bit more on how the closure and these new projects will go in?
Yeah, so these don't factor in the potential of Reed Hill View closing. These were existing conditions on our airfield that were identified in a RIM study that was done. It identified some hot spots where pilots were accidentally encroaching into active runways unauthorized. And so this is part of our physically modifying the airfield to improve airport operation safety.
So, Mr. Niemeyer, so the slide that you've got up there, I'll just go with that one real quickly. Is that just next door to where the ARF facility is, or do I have that wrong looking at the map where the new facilities building is?
Chair Conley, you have that correct. It's immediately north of where the new ARF building is.
Okay, and then I was actually out there today, obviously, and took pictures of Station 20, and I saw the work being done in the taxiway area where they were pouring cement and doing some work there. But what kind of space do we have for general aviation at this point at SJC? Because like Commissioner Patel stated a minute ago, more than likely Reed Hillview will close, and I'm not sure that South County can handle 765 flights a day. So obviously some of those flights are going to come over here. What kind of space do we have for that?
I think our operations folks would be able to speak to that a little bit better than I could, but I do acknowledge there are limited spaces already with our GA facilities, and that is not going to increase over time.
Okay. Thank you. The other question I had, could you go to your slide on incursion mitigation, please? So as I'm looking at the blue and the purple and the green area, this is the elimination of taxiways so that we don't have those incursions. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is correct.
And so either my eyes are getting bad or it's just too small. Is it taxiway G that's going away? Or let me just ask, which taxiways are going away?
I'm operating off of my phone right now. It's
okay.
very, yeah, I apologize. So I'm working, with very small font. It
Sure,
is
I can
taxiway.
take that question.
Yeah, sure.
Ryan, can you help with that?
Yeah, so this is the first phase of the RIM study, which we just completed this year. And so the primary goal of that was to close former runway 1129, what's now known as Whiskey 1. So the first phase of that, what we're calling the new taxiway Victor, is actually over the old runway 1129 alignment. And that's what you're viewing here on this graphic.
Okay.
But the RIM study as a whole is about $200 million of airfield safety improvements, starting with the west side, which the first project you're seeing right here, but it will extend out to a parallel taxi lane, a ramp, apron edge parallel taxi lane, as well as a new run-up pad and several other improvements.
Great. Very much needed because it's easy to make a mistake. Let's see if I've got another. So that was, I think those were the two questions that I had on this one. Appreciate the good work on these projects because they are definitely needed. Other commissioners have comments on.
Sorry, one sec, Chair Connolly. Adam, did you have a point you wanted to make?
Yeah, sorry, just to step in. So I'm also the GA supervisor, in addition to my noise responsibilities. We currently have 26 tie down locations and 46 hangar spaces, all of which are currently occupied. And there is a wait list right now of hangars, which is approximately 51 people, I believe. And the turnover for that's been about 1 a year. So unfortunately, as was mentioned before, we have practically no ability to absorb any overflow from Reed Hillview would that closure occur. So hopefully that answered a little more of your question, Dan.
Adam, I was just making a note, 26 tie downs, was it 43 hangar spaces?
46.
Oh, 46. And then we've got basically, a 50-year wait list going on if we're only losing 1 a year.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, great. It's just important for us to keep that in mind because we don't know what's going to happen there. And, those of us that do fly know that South County is not in a position to be able to handle those. So I hope that the airport will take an active role in looking at this situation with Reed Hillview in the future, because I just don't see where all that air traffic is going to end up going. Thank you. That takes care of our capital projects, unless there are other members of the commission that have questions.
Yeah, Commissioner Pyle has his hand up.
Okay, I can't see that, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just curious on that waiting list. Do we just charge the same rates? There's no auction system or anything like that for the limited slots, or it's just a certain inflation rate adjust or something for the rents on those?
It's currently $75 to apply, and then we charge an annual fee to maintain your position on the list of $50. And I'm not sure when the last time that fee was adjusted. It hasn't changed since I've been in this position.
Yeah, no, I was more curious about the actual rental rates. Just how do we determine the market rate on that?
Yes, those are adjusted annually using a CPI calculation. We compare rates to other rates at local Bay Area airports, and occasionally we don't increase the cost. We did this last year, and that was the first time in a few years that I think that had been done, but it's calculated every year. And the decision on whether or not to increase it's made on the director level usually.
And what is the cost?
For a hangar space, I believe it's $590. Let me just check the website. All of the rates are posted on the website as well. But it's $194 for the cheapest tie down, and yeah, it's $569 monthly for a hangar.
Great. Other commissioners have questions? Great. Thank you very much for the capital projects update. We're down to the legislative update. Matthew.
So I gave you guys a memo that basically highlights most things, except for last week, the House of Representatives voted to pass the infrastructure bill. So after 5 years of infrastructure week, we now actually have an infrastructure bill that's been signed into law. The airports are one of the few industries that completely survived unscathed in the bill. So there's $25 billion that's set aside for airports and aviation funding. Of that, as I put in the memo, is that there's $15 billion for airport infrastructure grants, and this is for $15 billion over 5 years. These grants are eligible for any PFC eligible item, so they're a little bit more expansive than just AIP funds, with the one exception of they can't be used for debt. So those would go for that. There's also a new airport terminal program that has $5 billion, although they segmented out based on the size of the airport, and that leaves about $150 million for all medium-sized airports to share each year. So if you were divided up amongst all the medium airports, it's a couple $1 million per year, but those are going to be done through competitive grants that the DOT will determine. So it has to be a competitive grant with some local matching. So all those are good things. As I outlined in the memo, there's still a lot of work that still needs to happen, including the AIP and appropriations funding bills that even though we are in the federal fiscal year of 2022, those things have not yet been passed. We're on a bunch of continuing resolutions at the moment. And that is my update.
Great, thank you, Matthew. Some of you may have noticed that Matthew was wearing two hats tonight, as Janelle was not with us, and I'd like to offer congratulations to Janelle Adams, who had a baby girl this last week, and mom and daughter are doing wonderfully. She's taking some needed time off to bond with her baby, and so congratulations, Janelle and family. Our next scheduled meeting, and I think we will be in person, is going to be on Monday, February 14th, 2022. You may bring your significant others and they can hang out in the, with you, and then take them out to dinner after our meeting. We will do the best we can to make that one quick so we don't interfere with too many plans, but it is 6 p.m. Monday, February 14th, 2022 in the Boeing McDonnell Douglas Conference Center on Airport Boulevard for the, and during that, we're going to talk about air services update. We'll have a marketing update, legislative update, our noise reports as normal, and community noise concerns. And I would like to ask Matthew that we add back in an update on what went on with City Council from the meeting in January over Guadalupe Gardens, so that we can have an update on what's going on with the abatement and the project there as well. Are there any other topics that members of the commission feel that since we've got you all here need to be added to that meeting?
Commissioner Hendricks has her hand raised.
Commissioner Hendricks, please go ahead.
Just quickly, I know we've talked about it in the past, and I know it's not our purview, but the 5G issue as it impacts aviation and flights. I think, Matthew, you said that you would update us as you had information. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose sight of that. So if there's something that does pop up of interest to the commission, if you would continue to share that 5G information with us, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I'll share what stuff becomes public, but again, Airport is not the expert on this. That's within the FCC, which I'm not sure that we as an airport can add much to this. It's going to have to be a conversation between the FAA and the FCC.
Okay, but if you just know how that conversation goes, that's all I'm asking.
And there were some recent reports that came out recently that you may have seen in the news on this. So I assume that's why you're bringing it up.
It is.
Yeah, in fact, the Aviation Magazine had an article on it this last week, having some concerns about 5G interfering with aircraft navigation. And so I definitely think, since it's a safety issue, that we ought to at least keep ourselves informed on the topic if we can. So maybe if we can add that in, that'd be great. Anything else from commissioners that feel we need an update on items? All right, well, any comments for the good of the order before we sign off? We won't. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken, or who?
This Surjit, I just want to Matthew ask, is any update on this COVID thing? Like last time you were saying, any concern at the airport, or how is it going? Just a little update on that one.
Sure. So from the standpoint, Assistant Director Ross touched on some of these things, but all the international flights have restarted as of today. Again, from overseas coming in. For us as the airport, most of our international flights are from Mexico at the moment. And so, none of the other ones have restarted yet, but we are having active conversations on those things. Social distancing is no longer a thing, but masks will continue to be a requirement when entering the airport. That's both a TSA requirement and a City of San Jose requirement. So that's going to be seen from the administration side. Our staff are slowly coming back. We will have a bunch of staff that start coming into the office on a regular basis starting in December. So those things, that's as well as happening. We continue to monitor, though, passenger traffic, which is the biggest component that we're watching. That remains down, and the revenue as a result remains down from that. But we will continue to monitor and report to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? So we're heading into the holiday season with Thanksgiving being right around the corner. Christmas and New Year's. Want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, or whatever holiday that you celebrate. It has been a tough couple of years. And, this may be the first year in a long time that, or it feels like a long time that we get to spend with family and friends. So take the opportunity to enjoy this season. I do want to give a plug for one of my favorite things at Christmas time, and I'll be down there volunteering. Christmas in the Park will be opening the day after Thanksgiving, and we'll go through January 2nd. And some of you may have known that, or may have experienced last year, that at History Park in San Jose, we had a drive-through Christmas in the Park event that is moving to Lake Cunningham for the season, and it's online tickets only for that. So I hope you'll take your families out and enjoy a little holiday spirit. With that being said, I want to thank all of you for your participation tonight. I want to thank staff for the great work that you've done in several areas. Councilmember Cohen and staff, thank you for bearing with us this evening. My friends, until 2022, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy